Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. This is a story about what if Rinnegan Naruto joins Suna Naruto x Temari. Before I start, please support for more amazing content, and do consider subscribing to my channel and share this video with your friends. This is written by Legendary Legacy and link in description and support writer. Let's start the video. Give the scroll to me, Naruto. Naruto, you can't let him have it. Uzumaki Naruto's mind was consumed by a torrent of conflicting thoughts and emotions as he turned back and forth between the two speakers. The first, Mizuki-sensei, was smirking down at him from a high tree branch, while Iruka-sensei, the second speaker, was pinned to the wall of a small wooden shed by several kunai, one of which was buried deep into his right leg. The whole day had seemingly gone from bad to worse. After failing his genin exam for the third time that morning, Naruto had fallen into a deep depression until Mizuki had come to him with a secret. He'd said that if Naruto managed to steal the village's scroll of secret techniques and learn them, he'd still be able to become a genin. He succeeded in getting the scroll, and then after practicing for a while, managed to master the first technique right before Iruka had shown up. For some reason, he'd seemed awfully surprised when Naruto had told him about Mizuki's special test. But now everything seemed to be falling apart. Listen to me, Naruto, Iruka begged while prying the kunai from his leg. Mizuki tricked you into stealing the scroll so he could take it for himself. The whole test was just a sham. Mizuki laughed. Don't listen to a word he says, Naruto. He's just scared. You can see it in his eyes. He pointed toward his fellow Chunin just to prove his point. He doesn't want you to have that scroll because he doesn't want you getting stronger. Naruto's eyes widened. What? He turned back to Iruka, who in turn was still glaring up at Mizuki. In fact, he continued, neither Iruka, the Hokage, nor anyone else in this entire village even want you to become a genin. That isn't true, Mizuki. Iruka shouted. Oh, isn't it? He asked mockingly. Then tell me, Iruka, why has the final test for the genin exam these last 3 times been Bunshin no Jutsu when you know full well that it's Naruto's worst technique? That's not the reason. Mizuki gave him another mockingly shocked look. It's not? Well, what other reason could you have for continuously using Bunshin no Jutsu for the final test when there are several other techniques that could be used instead? Henge Kawarimi hell, we've even passed students for performing a simple Shunshin no Jutsu in the past. And here you will stand there and say that you have no ulterior motives for targeting only Naruto's weakness among all the students? Naruto could feel chills running up and down his body from the way the conversation was going. Iruka may have been harder on him than most of the other students, but he wouldn't have blatantly tried to keep him from becoming a ninja, would he? The look on Iruka's face showed of barely repressed guilt. But no, he still couldn't believe it. It was only yesterday that Iruka had taken him out for ramen. That had probably been the nicest thing that anyone had ever done for him in his whole life. Why would he do that unless he already knew that Naruto was going to fail his exam and was just trying to cheer him up beforehand? Naruto was thinking so much he almost missed the rest of the conversation that was still going on. The only reason I treat Naruto harder than the others is because he has the lowest marks in the academy, Iruka answered. I have to make sure that he's fully ready to become a ninja before I pass him, or he'll just be in over his head. Mizuki suddenly turned very serious. And you're saying that it has absolutely nothing to do with your parents, Iruka? A look of pain washed over Iruka's face, while one of bewilderment appeared on Naruto's. Parents? What do I have to do with them? Don't say a word, Mizuki. Iruka demanded. You know the law. Law? Naruto wondered silently. Now there was some sort of law he didn't know about. Why was everything so confusing all of a sudden? Naruto could feel a headache, as well as a strange pain in his abdomen, starting to build. Naruto, Mizuki said quietly after a slight pause. How many times have you had to ask yourself, what have I done? What did I ever do to make an entire village hate me? I imagine it must have been many times, because we both know that their hatred runs much deeper than the results of a few harmless pranks, correct? Mizuki! Iruka shouted. Shut up! Mizuki spat. Why should Naruto be the only one left in the dark? Doesn't he deserve to know the truth? But the Hokage dash. You want to know the truth, don't you, Naruto? Mizuki asked, ignoring Iruka's continued pleas. The need to sort out all of the confusing thoughts in his head coupled with the natural curiosity of a young boy made Naruto immediately start nodding his head. Yes, tell me, I won't let you! Iruka yelled, sprinting forward and up the tree to where Mizuki stood. Mizuki watched, chuckling lightly as Iruka grabbed a kunai and slashed at his face. Before it could make contact, he blocked with a kunai of his own and sent a sharp kick into Iruka's injured knee, following it with a fast jab to his chin. The scar-faced Chunin let out a croak of pain as he lost his initial balance and tumbled unceremoniously to the ground. Iruka-sensei! Naruto called to his fallen teacher. He moved forward to see if he was okay but was cut off when Mizuki landed in front of him. He took a small step back before the older man placed a firm hand on his shoulder. Naruto, 12 years ago a 9-tailed demon fox attacked the village. The fox killed over 100 villagers, 2 of which were Iruka's parents. Naruto struggled to hold down the growing nervousness inside him, but was unable to keep himself from shivering. So what's that have to do with me? I mean, I know about the Kyuubi. He attacked the village and the yondaime sacrificed himself to kill it. Not kill, Naruto, Mizuki corrected, letting a small grin form on his face. Seal. The Kyuubi was sealed away, within the body of a newborn child. His shaking grew worse, his subconscious already beginning to understand before the rest of his mind. And newborn? You, Naruto. Time seemed to stand still for Naruto upon hearing those words. I, demon? Realizing he didn't even seem capable of rational thought anymore, he simply turned his gaze to the ground below him, lost in a trance as all of the pieces began to fit themselves together. All the cold glares he received, all of the threats and abuse, both physical and emotional, and the loneliness. Without even thinking, he slowly reached up and placed his hand against his stomach, right where his ugly birthmark was. As much as he wanted to deny it, shout at the top of his lungs that it wasn't true, call Mizuki a liar, deep down he knew it was true. He was still lost in his stupor when Mizuki placed another hand on his other shoulder. I know it's hard to accept, Naruto, but now you know the truth. You carry the Kyuubi inside you. That's why everyone in the village hates you so passionately. That's why Iruka and the others don't want you to succeed as a ninja. And that's why, no matter how hard you work and how deeply you dream, you will never be made the great Hokage and be acknowledged by all your doubters. Because no matter what you do, no one is going to see Uzumaki Naruto. All they're going to see is the container of the demon fox that ruined so many of their lives. Each word spoken felt like a knife wound piercing all over Naruto's body. The last part about not becoming a Hokage he felt right in the center of his heart. And that is also why Mizuki continued softly. I now have to kill you. Before the statement had even registered, Naruto felt a sharp pain in his side as Mizuki kicked him with full force, sending him crashing into the trunk of a tree where he crumpled limply to the ground. A light chuckle escaped the throat of the white-haired traitor. He casually picked up the discarded forbidden scroll with one hand, and grabbed one of the giant shuriken from his back with the other. I can't say that you haven't been very helpful, monster. But I'm afraid that from this point onward you'd just be getting in my way. He began twirling the shuriken over his head. Enjoy your eternal hell, demon. He brought his arm down to let the shuriken fly, but was stopped when a recovered Iruka grabbed his arm, causing the shuriken to sail off harmlessly in the wrong direction. Stop this, Mizuki, Iruka begged, trying to keep all his weight on his one good leg. Why are you doing all of this? Mizuki glared at him in annoyance. For power, Iruka. More than the Hokage would ever allow me to possess. But if you wanted to die first so badly, all you had to do was say so. Pulling out another kunai, he made to slash at his former partner's face, but was countered by Iruka's own kunai. Unfortunately, Iruka once again left himself wide open for another attack on his damaged knee, which Mizuki capitalized upon, and Iruka fell to the ground again, clutching his leg in agony. Mizuki unhooked the second shuriken from his back and stood victoriously over his fallen comrade. I've been hoping for a moment like this for a long time, Iruka. Goodbye. Darkness, the sound of dripping water, a musty feeling in the air. He definitely wasn't in the forest anymore. Opening his eyes, Naruto took in his strange new surroundings. If he wasn't mistaken, he appeared to be in a sewer of some kind. Did Konoha even have sewers? More importantly, what had become of Iruka-sensei and Mizuki-sensei? The last thing he could remember was Mizuki saying he was going to Ki. Am I dead? He asked. He sure hoped not. What sort of afterlife involved a sewer? But on the other hand, it did seem to represent the way his life had turned out, he supposed. Unsure of what to do, he simply began walking through the dingy corridors, hoping that maybe they'd lead to some place a little less stinky. He didn't have to go far before he found himself standing before a gigantic rusty gate, which had a small paper seal attached it. He was about to turn and walk the other way when he suddenly felt an enormous amount of power coming from the other side of the gates. He took a step forward and immediately fell backward when a large animalistic face appeared before him. Well, the creature growled. 12 years together, and you finally decide to visit. Naruto stared up in awe of the thing before him. You're the? So I guess the secret's out, huh? It replied in what must have been a mocking tone. You may refer to me as Kyuubi-sama, or just master if you prefer. Naruto hung his head. Then it really was true. He could feel tears beginning to creep into his eyes, but fought them down and glared up at the demon fox. It's all because of you that everyone in the village hates me, the Kyuubi snorted, an action that almost blew Naruto off his feet. Now that's hardly fair, mortal. Really, do you think I enjoy being trapped inside the body of a loudmouth weakling like you? If you want to blame someone, then blame the guy who stuck me in here. That guy, Naruto knew, had been the yondaime, the person Naruto had admired for the majority of his life and one of the driving forces behind Naruto deciding to become Hokage himself. But all of the admiration he felt was now being rivaled by the sheer amount of bitterness he was feeling upon learning the truth about himself. Why had the yondaime picked him? Was it more convenient since he didn't have parents or something? And just in case you're still curious, the fox interrupted his thoughts. We are still alive. And stop with all the self-pitying. It's pathetic, even for you. Besides, it's not like living with me inside you is without advantages. While the being alive part was comforting, Naruto was still growing angrier at the Kyuubi. Shut up, Baka Fox. What could you possibly do that could help me? The Kyuubi grinned in a way that made him look even more sinister. Perhaps a demonstration is in order? Naruto watched on as a wave of blood-red chakra began pouring through the gates and quickly began to surround his body. Hey, what are you doing? He asked in alarm. Just think of it as a temporary loan, human. My way of paying the rent, you might say. You'll thank me for it later. Naruto could slowly begin to feel himself returning to consciousness. The only thing left of the sewer was the demonic laughter of the Kyuubi that faded away behind him. What in the... Mizuki muttered. He had been about to bring his shuriken down onto the body of Iruka, when out of the corner of his eye, he noticed a red aura coming from the body of the fox brat. Iruka, through the searing pain in his leg, noticed it as well. Naruto? He whispered. Naruto silently climbed back to his feet, turning a deathly and feral gaze to Mizuki, accentuated by his now red eyes and more defined whisker marks. Even his canine teeth and fingernails had grown longer and sharper. Neither Chunin moved as they watched the boy adopt an animal-like position on his hands and feet. Mizuki finally shook off his surprise and began spinning his weapon again. I don't know what you're up to, brat, but you're still going to die now. So saying, he sent the shuriken flying towards the boy. What happened next was too quick for the traitor to follow. In the blink of an eye, Naruto had jumped over the shuriken and sprung himself from the tree trunk behind him toward Mizuki. The next thing Mizuki felt was an explosion of pain as Naruto raked him across the face with his claw-like fingernails. He barely had time to cover his face and scream in pain before Naruto rebounded back and drove his foot into the back of his head, sending him into a dark and blissfully painless slumber. Iruka watched the entire exchange, all of which hadn't taken more than 10 seconds, with a look of horror on his face. He didn't know how it was possible, but he knew for a fact that this was not the Naruto that he knew. The eyes, the whiskers, the red chakra, they all told him the same thing. The Kyuubi had taken control of its host. Iruka was now staring at the monster that was responsible for killing his parents. After making certain that Mizuki was not getting back up, Naruto turned to check on Iruka, but froze when he saw him. Instantly, the red aura vanished and his body returned to its normal state. The look that Iruka was giving him was one of unmistakable anger and fear, just like he'd seen every day from almost everyone else he knew. But somehow, it hurt a hell of a lot more seeing it come from Iruka. Without a second thought, Naruto turned and ran into the forest. Iruka's eyes widened in shock. Naruto, wait! He tried to run after him, but was stopped by the pain in his knee. He cursed himself, knowing there was no way he could catch up to the boy now. This is all my fault, he whispered. It was well past midnight when Iruka had returned with the scroll and an unconscious Mizuki. After the entire ordeal was explained to the Hokage and the rest of the shinobi that were present, the Sandaime had issued for everyone to comb the area for Naruto. Now everyone was back in front of the ninja academy. No one had seen anything of Naruto, save for a small trail that had led out of the village. When everyone had settled down, Sarutobi Asuma was the first to speak. What do we do about this, Hokage-sama? We have the scroll back and we now know that it was Mizuki who caused all of this. But in regards to the boy himself, a ninja standing directly behind Iruka grunted. Why don't we just leave him go? It'd save the village a lot of trouble. Without warning, Iruka turned and slugged the man in the face. He was quickly restrained by 2 others before he did further damage. You don't know anything about that boy, he shouted. You'd realize that if you ever bothered to look at him, and not just the thing that's sealed inside him. Please calm yourself, Iruka, the Hokage told him. I know how you're feeling, but fighting amongst ourselves won't help matters any. If I may, Hokage-sama? Everyone turned to the back where a silver-haired man with 3/4 of his face covered up was slowly approaching. You're late, Kakashi, the Hokage reprimanded. Hatake Kakashi blinked with his one exposed eye. Well, you see, while out investigating, a single magpie flew by me, so I had to go to a temple and purify myself. Various mutterings of disbelief were heard from the crowd. Please get on with it, Kakashi, the Hokage urged impatiently. Yes, well, all we really have to worry about is finding the boy and explaining things to him. Since Uzumaki Naruto failed to pass his genin exams today, it's not possible for us to label him as a missing nin, because obviously, he's not a ninja yet. That means that once we find him and convince him to come back, there will be no need for any sort of punishment. Iruka grinned widely in relief while the Hokage hid a smile of his own. Leave it to Kakashi to find a loophole like that. I want you all to get some rest, he announced. We'll begin a broader search at sunrise. As everyone began to disperse, Kakashi patted Iruka on the shoulder. Beat up Mizuki all by himself, did he? Seeing Iruka nod, he grinned, or at least it was probably a grin judging by the one eye. No worries, alright? Iruka just nodded again before gazing up at the night sky. I'm really sorry, Naruto. End Chapter 1. Chapter 1. Did you hear? I heard my mom say that Uzumaki Naruto left the village last night. Yeah, me too. He must have been really upset about failing again. Nah, I heard he tried to make off with the Hokage's secret scroll. Heh, for all the good it would have done a loser like him. Yeah, it's not like he was that good a ninja or anything. Still, I don't know why my parents seemed so happy about it. You 3 pay attention. The 3 whispering kids shuddered and sank into their chairs as everyone else in the room turned to look at their table. Sorry, Iruka-sensei, they mumbled together. Iruka shook his head and turned back to his clipboard. It was perfectly obvious what the children were talking about. It was the same thing that everyone in the entire village was talking about. The demon child was gone, and if the villagers didn't fear and respect the Hokage as much as they did, the day would have been declared a village holiday. Iruka sighed in frustration, feeling his hands tighten on the clipboard that he held. It had been nearly 4 hours since the Hokage had sent a squad out to search for the missing boy. So far nothing had turned up, and Iruka was becoming more distracted with each passing minute. He'd been finding himself checking the doorway almost every 5 minutes, hoping to see someone dragging the rambunctious boy into the classroom like so many times before. He should have been out there looking for him with the others. But unfortunately, with Mizuki now gone as well, he was the only one left to run the academy. Naruto's leaving had been his fault, after all. No matter how much the Hokage tried to reassure him otherwise, that it was a compilation of all the rejection and hatred over the past 12 years that had finally caught up with the boy, Iruka still knew that last night it had been him that had driven that final nail into the coffin. Naruto, you need to come back, he pleaded silently. Iruka-sensei. Iruka snapped out of his thoughts. He looked up to see one of the gossiping boys from before with his hand in the air. Is it really true that Naruto left the village and you were the one who stopped him from stealing the Hokage's scroll? The room grew quiet, as the majority of the students who had heard bits and pieces of the incident from their parents perked up, hoping to hear the story from its source. Iruka gave everyone in the room a stern look. Although I have been specifically instructed by the Hokage himself to not discuss anything about this incident, I am going to tell you that even though Naruto has left the village, what you've probably heard about the circumstances behind it is most likely false. And until this incident has been properly settled, I'll tolerate no further questions about it. Understood? Everyone nodded. Good. Now I will begin dividing you all into your 3-person teams, so listen closely for your names. As Iruka began reading off names, several of the students became lost in their own thoughts. Hyuga Hinata hung her head sadly. Having watched Naruto for a long time now, she knew very well the sort of person he really was. It was true that he was a prankster and a troublemaker, but she saw the hidden agenda behind his actions. If there was any reason why Naruto had left, it certainly hadn't been because he tried to steal something. Inuzuka Kiba felt a bit disappointed. He never would have considered Naruto and himself real friends, but they'd had some pretty good times making trouble for Iruka-sensei together. He'd miss having another troublemaker around. The only thing that went through Haruno Sakura's mind was that she wouldn't be bothered by that annoying boy who wouldn't get a clue that she wasn't interested in him. At least she had one less person trying to keep her away from Sasuke-kun. To anyone else, Uchiha Sasuke remained as stoic and as broody as ever, but if one were to look extremely close, they might notice a slight furrowing of the prodigy's brow and a small darkening of his eyes. Guess if he's really gone that makes you the new dobe, doesn't it, Shikamaru? Akimichi Choji teased between shoveling chips into his mouth. Shikamaru just rolled his eyes and sighed in a bored manner. Team 7, Iruka continued. Uchiha Sasuke Haruno Sakura. Yada! Sakura cried victoriously while several other girls groaned in despair. Iruka frowned at the sudden outbursts and continued. And Nara Shikamaru. Shikamaru and Choji both looked downcast at finding out they wouldn't be on the same team. When they turned to each other, both forced grins onto their faces. Lucky you, Choji said. Being paired up with the prodigy should make things a lot easier for you. Shikamaru sighed, noticing how Sakura was still giggling and staring starry-eyed at Sasuke. I guarantee it ends up more trouble than it's worth. Hey bum, Yamanaka Ino muttered from the row in front of him. You better keep that billboard brow away from my Sasuke-kun. If I find out anything's going on with them, I'm holding you responsible, understand? Shikamaru just brushed her off before turning back to Choji. Well, at least I wasn't on a team with her, Choji laughed. Yeah, I'll bet that wouldn't be much fun. And finally, Iruka's voice rang out again. Team 10 will be Akimichi Choji Yamanaka Ino. Choji's head fell to his desk. Shikamaru gave him a sympathetic pat on the shoulder, and as Shizutaro, Choji and Ino looked to the other side of the room, finding their new teammate sitting at the very edge of the room, idly picking his nose. Feeling their eyes on him, he turned and greeted them with a small wave. Neither of them looked very thrilled. You will all be assigned to your new Jounin leaders tomorrow morning, Iruka informed them. For now, you have the rest of the day to yourselves. Good luck to all of you. A few hours later in the afternoon, the Sandaime sat in his office, busying himself with his stack of paperwork when a knock at his door snapped him out of his actions. Enter, he called. The door opened, revealing Shiranui Genma and Namishi Reito. What do you have to report? He asked them. The two men saluted and Genma spoke first. Well, Hokage-sama, I'm afraid to say that we've all run into a slight complication in regards to the Kyuubi boy. The Hokage kept his face neutral and cleared his throat to make sure his voice remained level before speaking. What sort of complications are we talking about? Did you find Naruto? The two Jounin rubbed the back of their heads in discomfort. Well, here's the thing, Reito said cautiously. The two of us and the others followed the boy's trail for a few miles, when the trail that he was leaving suddenly split off in different directions. Sarutobi frowned. Split off? They nodded. What does that mean exactly? Well, most likely the boy figured out that the village would be sending people after him, and to throw us off, he created a few Kage Bunshins to create additional trails for us to follow, hoping it would give him additional time to get away, Reito explained. Impossible, Genma shrugged. I admit it seems strange that a kid like him would be able to think up something as smart as that, but I don't see any. That's not what I mean, Sarutobi said a little louder than intended. Just yesterday Naruto failed his genin exams because he wasn't able to create even one successful bunshin. I watched it myself. Now you're telling me that he's capable of creating Kage bunshins? At least 10 at once, actually, Genma informed him, shrugging again. We tracked down a few of them but they all vanished the moment we approached them. The Kage bunshin no jutsu is one of the techniques from the scroll that he took last night, Rado commented while rubbing his chin. To learn a jounin level technique like that in the span of about an hour is unheard of. The fact that it was a boy who's not even a genin, and was able to make so many of them at once should be, by all accounts, absolutely impossible. What exactly are you thinking here, Rado? Sarutobi asked. The jounin was silent for a few moments, trying to decide how best to approach the subject. Well, Hokage-sama, it's just you remember what Irika told us last night? How the boy seemed to change when he beat Mizuki. He said he had a red aura and was acting like an animal. Combine that with the fact that he's mastered a technique that should normally take the average ninja a minimum of 3 days to learn in just hours, and I have to wonder, you're thinking that perhaps the Kyuubi has somehow taken control of Naruto? Sarutobi finished for him. Both jounin nodded, causing the old man to sigh. I'm not ready to start jumping to such conclusions yet. Not until I've had a chance to see it for myself, at least. He let out another sigh and sat back down in his chair. He'd never felt so old before in his life. Do you have any idea where Naruto might be headed? Genma distractedly played with the senbon needle in his mouth, pushing it from side to side with his tongue. We checked 6 of the 10 paths that the boy left, all of them coming up blank. The remaining 4 led east, northwest, southeast, and southwest. We have no borders to other countries to the east and southeast, so unless he took one of the western trails, he'll probably remain in the fire country. But if he did go west, he could be halfway to Suna to Iwa or anywhere in between by now, Rado pointed out. Sarutobi couldn't help but look miserable, realizing just how easily this could have all been avoided. But there was no sense dwelling on the past. Instead, he'd have to work on making Naruto's life more pleasant from here on out. Of course, he still needed to be found or else there'd be nothing to do for him. I'd like you and the others to use the rest of the day to continue searching for him. Search as fast as you can, because if he leaves the boundaries of our country, there won't be much we can do. If nothing is found by midnight you'll have to return, as the other jounins will have to be here in the morning to meet their new genin students. The 2 men saluted again and disappeared, leaving the Hokage alone again with nothing but his thoughts and a stack of business papers. Naruto. 5 days later, the search was officially called off. Uzumaki Naruto was nowhere to be found within the country of fire. The sun beat down mercilessly over the wide and desolate sands of the wind country, a part of the world that was so hot and dry that even cacti had trouble growing. The strong winds blew almost constantly, whipping up frequent and blistering sandstorms all across the horizon, and out in the middle of the barren wasteland, a single boy trudged onward. So damn hot, Naruto croaked through cracked lips and a very dry throat. So damn tired. The young blonde was currently moving at twice the speed of a large tortoise, sweating profusely and constantly having to tell himself that the ramen stand he kept seeing on the horizon was nothing but a mirage. He had unzipped his orange coat and pulled it over his head, offering himself the slightest bit of shade, but not doing anything in the way of escaping the heat. His green goggles were pulled over his eyes to protect them from the sand, but with the amount of sand being kicked around, he still couldn't see very far ahead of him. He felt like such an idiot. It had been 4.5 days since he'd fled from Konoha. Since then, he traveled aimlessly, not sleeping, not eating, not even paying attention to where he was going. He never stopped to think about it. But now that he was stranded deep in the heart of this desert, he couldn't understand just how he had managed to travel so far and so fast without much of a problem. There was a couple times where he'd find himself almost blacking out of sorts. But when he came back around to himself he noticed that he was still running, like he'd been on autopilot. And while he ran, the Kyuubi had watched in silence. Since that night, the Kyuubi hadn't spoken to him again, though it was sure that Naruto still had it on his mind. Several times the Kyuubi could feel the boy reaching his limits, and would pump a little more of its own chakra into his body and allow him to keep going. It might have seemed odd to be constantly helping the boy like that, but if it got him further away from Konoha and the Hokage, he could spare it. However, the Kyuubi now had more important matters on its mind. They had first come across the massive ocean of sand around midnight, long before the sun had risen. It had been freezing then, but it was now mid-afternoon, and the boy was beginning to show signs of heatstroke, which was very worrisome for the fox. There weren't many things that he couldn't protect his host from. Poison he could neutralize, viruses and diseases were a little more difficult, but it was still no problem getting rid of them either. Unfortunately, there was nothing the demon fox could do in regards to regulating his host's body temperature, and that meant that if Naruto didn't find some shelter from the heat really quick, there would be severe problems. Boy, he said, hoping to get his attention. There was no answer. Hey, mortal! He shouted a little louder. Shut up, fox, Naruto panted. I'm not speaking to you. Don't be so stubborn, human. You need to get us out of this desert, or at least find some shade or something, Naruto growled. And just where would you like me to go, Baka Fox? He weakly swept his arms around to gesture towards the surroundings. There's nothing but sand as far as I can see. Well, that's your fault for not paying attention to where you were running then, isn't it? The fox snarled. Look, if you don't get out of this sun real fast, we're both going to die. Yeah? So what? Naruto demanded. It's not like anybody is gonna miss either of us. That may be well and good for you, brat, but I'm not going to die here. Just shut up, I'm tired of Naruto's vision began to blur. Hey! Don't you dare pass out. Not gonna pass out, Naruto whispered half a second before falling face first into the scorching hot sand, and the QB was left uttering several loud obscenities. End Chapter 1. Chapter 2. Another boring mission. I stand off to the side and watch with the others while my little brother kills 18 armed A-rank ninja without even trying. And to think, 3 years ago I thought being a ninja would be a little more fun. These thoughts belong to a young teenage girl who was currently walking through the desert with 3 males, 2 of which were young, about her age, and another who was several years older. The girl wore a tight-fitting purple outfit with a skirt that ended slightly above her knees. Her blonde hair was pulled back into 4 short ponytails, and she was currently shielding herself from the rays of the sun with a giant fan held over her head. Off to her left was a boy dressed completely in black, looking completely unfazed by the blazing sun that was beating down on him. His face was covered in purple markings and he carried a large, bulging object wrapped in bandages on his back. In between them was a shorter boy with red hair and thick dark marks around his aquamarine-colored eyes. He was also carrying a large object on his back. In his case, it was a large sand-colored gourd. Although none of the travelers were looking particularly happy at the moment, this one seemed to give off an aura of hatred that made his companions want to not walk too close to him. Behind them walked the older man, who had 2 red lines along his right cheek and a white cloth pulled down over the left side of his face. We're only a few miles from Suna, the man informed them. Once we report to Kazekage-sama, I'd like the 3 of you to proceed to the training grounds. I'll meet with you there later to discuss our next mission. The girl and boy in black both nodded, while the redhead walked on like he hadn't heard a word the man had said. The girl silently went back to musing. It was great that they were receiving so many missions recently, but it was honestly getting more and more difficult to get excited about them anymore. She glanced over at her little brother. Ever since Gaara had become the official 3rd member to their team, it had felt like she'd barely been needed at all. She could have gathered information from enemies, but quite frankly, both Gaara, with his 3rd eye ability, and Kankuro, with his hidden and disguised puppets, were better at that than she. And planning? Oh sure, she was best qualified and would love to do it, but with Gaara on the team, who needed plans? All the boy had to do was find the target, and they would all be dead, or tortured for information and then dead, without the slightest of efforts. She knew that Kankuro felt the same way about the lackluster parts that they played on missions. If it wasn't for the fact that they both needed to come along to calm Gaara from one of his mood swings, their younger brother could have done every single one of their missions to date by himself. It was infuriating and depressing, not to mention quite damaging to the kunoichi's ego, to witness her youngest brother showing her up again and again. The redhead Gaara seemed to feel his sister's eyes on him and turned to her. "What do you want?" he said in what had to be called a growl. Temari felt that all-too-familiar chill run down her spine at the way her brother glared at her. "And nothing, just spacing out, I guess." She smiled reassuringly, hoping that he would buy it. At this stage in her life, she was pretty certain that her brother couldn't read minds, but one could never be too certain around him. Gaara just snorted and turned away, making Temari breathe a little easier. She really did love her brother. Unfortunately, he also scared the ever-living shit out of her, which made for a lot of possible counseling issues that she might have to look into one day. They all walked in silence for a few more minutes before Kankuro stopped abruptly. "Hey, Baki-sensei?" he said, catching the other's attention. Baki had already stopped as soon as Kankuro had, having almost walked right into him. "What is it?" Kankuro pointed off into the distance. "That orange thing over there, it's not a mirage or something, is it?" The others followed the direction that he was pointed, and through the swirling sand, all could make out the figure of what appeared to be a person lying face down in the sand. "Should we go check, Baki-sensei?" Temari asked. "Why bother?" Gaara questioned, sounding annoyed. "It's probably just a corpse," Baki grimaced. "It wouldn't do to just leave someone there if they're still alive." "Temari, Kankuro, investigate," he commanded. The siblings nodded and took off. Gaara stared after them before walking off again. "I'm not waiting for you then," he announced. Baki just watched his youngest student walk away before moving to catch up with the others. Upon reaching the fallen person, Temari knelt down and pulled off the orange jacket from over its head, revealing a young boy with untamed blonde hair, wearing a pair of green goggles over his eyes. She gently reached down and turned him to his back, being wary as his skin was already bright red, telling her that he had been there for at least an hour. "What's the verdict?" she heard her brother ask. The kunoichi placed 2 fingers to the boy's neck, feeling a faint but steady pulse. "He's still alive," she confirmed. "But he'd most likely suffering from sunstroke. We need to get him to a hospital if he's going to live." Lifting his head up and cradling it with her arm, Temari slowly pulled off the goggles from his eyes. The areas around his eyes were incredibly pale compared to the rest of his face, and there appeared to be several strange markings along the boy's cheeks, which she assumed were some sort of birthmark, or something. Then the boy's eyes opened, and Temari got a good look at just how deep and blue they were. The boy had nice eyes, she decided. I see an angel, he whispered faintly, a small goofy grin appearing on his face. Temari felt herself blush, then growled when Kankuro started laughing. Yeah, it's sunstroke alright. He's already delusional. Temari elbowed him in the stomach, making him crumple over in pain. Enough fooling around, you two, Baki commanded. If the boy is still alive, then we need to get him back to the village. Any idea where he's from? Temari shrugged. He's not wearing a shinobi headband. She shook the boy slightly, trying to get him to focus on her again. Hey kid, can you tell me where you're from? The boy seemed confused by the question, but then his eyes widened in fear and the next thing Temari knew he was out of her arms and crouching down in an animalistic manner, several feet away from her and the others. The three Suna shinobi tensed in surprise. "C can't go back," he slurred, baring his teeth at them. W won't let, and then he collapsed again. The group didn't move for a few seconds, waiting to see if anything else would happen before Baki relaxed. He calmly walked over and scooped the boy up into his arms. "Let's go," he said. The others nodded and followed shortly behind, the village of Sunagake already coming into view over the sand dunes on the horizon. The next several hours went by in a blur for Uzumaki Naruto. He only managed to catch snippets of what was going on in that time as his body continued to lose battles against unconsciousness. For a while he could feel himself being carried by someone, though he couldn't bring his eyes to focus enough to make out who it was. Later, he found himself in a small room with several people in white standing around him. A couple of times he tried to ask what was happening and where he was, but no one seemed to know what he was saying. Still lost in confusion, he tried once to get up and run. He would have succeeded, but the moment he sat up a burst of pain flew through his entire body, causing him to black out again. At times when he was awake his body felt like it was on fire, but then there would be a cooling sensation, and the feeling that he had been submerged in water. After several processes of pain and soothing, the people in white began wrapping him in some kind of cloth. They placed him on something cushy, most likely a bed, and after one last sudden jab of pain in his arm, he was out again. Heatstroke, second-degree burns over half of his body, first-degree over the rest, disorientation and multiple bouts of unconsciousness brought on by lack of sleep, food and water. Quite frankly, Baki-san, I can't see how the boy is even alive, much less in such stable condition. Baki nodded, stroking his chin in thought. Any clues as to where he might be from? The young nurse shook her head. Nothing, sir. Although? He prodded. The woman glanced around the room as though she were afraid to continue, then spoke in a lowered voice. While cooling the boy's body, we discovered unusual markings on his stomach. It's not like anything that any one of us had ever seen, so there's no telling what it really is. The Jounin frowned. I see. By any chance, is he alert enough to answer a few questions? We gave him a light painkiller a few hours ago, and he's been sleeping since, she informed him. I can take you to his room, if you want. As they were leaving the front desk of the hospital, the front doors swung open and Temari and Kankuro walked in. I still don't see what the big deal is, Kankuro muttered grumpily. Temari turned to him with a scowl. Are you saying you're not even the least bit curious? We found a half-dead person out alone in the desert, and you're not interested one bit about him. Should I be? He asked honestly. It's not like I know him or anything. Then go home, Temari said flatly, and be alone with Gaara when he's in one of his moods? Are you insane? Then quit bitching and come on. The two siblings followed their instructor and the nurse up to the third floor and entered one of the rooms. They found out very quickly that the boy was indeed very much alert. Hey you bastards! What the hell's going on here, huh? The boy shouted. He would have most likely been thrashing his bandaged arms and legs about in anger if they weren't strapped down to the sides of his bed. If you're trying to get me to talk, you're wasting your time. I won't say a thing no matter how much more you torture me. So there, he ended his tirade by blowing them a raspberry. There was a group blink among the four people in the doorway. I hate him already, Kankuro stated. The nurse calmly walked over to the bedside and opened the top drawer of a cabinet sitting next to it. When she pulled out a small scalpel, the boy literally freaked. Ah. I was just kidding. Don't torture me. I don't know anything, really. Please have mercy, I'm fragile. Temari was beginning to share her brother's opinion of the boy. He might have been amusing to her if he wasn't being so damn loud. Please relax, boy, the nurse told him. I'm only here to change your bandages. And please keep your voice down, there are other patients in this hospital, you know? The blonde looked ready to start shouting again when her words seemed to catch up with him. Hospital? That's right. Then you're not here to torture me? No, sir, she assured him. Can I do it? Kankuro asked before receiving a small kick to the shin from Temari. Baki ignored the trade-off between the two siblings and moved to sit on a chair on the opposite side of the bed. Now then, boy, he started, drawing the boy's attention from the nurse as she started cutting through the cloth wraps on his arm. If you don't mind, there are a few questions that we need answered. The boy scrunched his face up in suspicion. Why should I have to tell you anything? I don't even know you, and I don't know where I am or anything. Why should I trust you? Baki took a deep breath, reminding himself that the boy did have a fairly good reason for being a little uptight. Very well, I suppose I can answer a few of your questions first then. Temari and Kankuro moved forward, now a little more eager for some answers than before, while the boy looked on intently as the nurse continued stripping his bandages. You may call me Baki. These two, he gestured to the siblings, are a part of my genin team, Kankuro and Temari. You are currently in a hospital in Sunagakure. My team and I found you unconscious in the desert several hours ago. You were suffering from a severe heat stroke, so we brought you here for treatment. Now until you answer a few of our questions, I'm afraid that's all I'm able to tell you. So, the boy turned his eyes to the floor, remaining silent before letting out a tired sigh. I'm Uzumaki Naruto. Was from Konoha. Are you a shinobi? Baki asked. Well, not really. I mean, I want to be one, but I kept having bad luck with passing the genin exams. Baki thought about that. He wasn't a ninja, but if he had training experience already. I've got a question, Kankuro spoke up. What kind of idiot wanders around in a desert in the middle of the day? Especially while wearing those thick and very ugly clothes. Naruto pointed and glared menacingly with his free hand. Shut up. At least I don't wear makeup. Temari stifled a chuckle as she grabbed the back of her brother's shirt, keeping him from throttling the boy. This is ritual face paint, you loud-mouthed midget. Who are you calling a midget? Naruto shouted, trying his best to stand up despite his restraints. And I still say it looks like makeup. I'll have you know that there are very important meanings behind wearing this paint. Ahem. The two boys turned back to Baki, who was looking more than a little annoyed. Sorry, sensei, Kankuro mumbled while Naruto settled for grinning and scratching the back of his head in embarrassment. Now Uzumaki Naruto, the Jounin continued. I believe that once you're sufficiently healed, you'll be able to return to Konoha. No! Everyone cringed at the force of Naruto's outburst. He lowered his head, staring down at the white sheets of his bed. Sorry, he said quietly. It's just that I can't go back. Ever. Temari and the rest of her team, and even the nurse could sense the pain and sadness resonating from the blonde. You were exiled? She asked cautiously. His expression darkened even more. I'd rather not talk about it, if you don't mind. Temari nodded in understanding, though inside she was growing even more curious about the boy before her. Something about him just seemed to draw her interest, in a way. It was almost like there was something familiar about him, but she couldn't figure what it might have been. Baki cleared his throat again. In that case, Naruto, you can take up refuge here in Suna for the time being. However, Suna and Konoha are joined through a mutual treaty, and if anyone were to come looking for you from Konoha, just know that there wouldn't be anything we could do for you, as it could violate the treaty. Naruto looked up at the man in astonishment. And since you're still a ninja in training, perhaps we can work things out with the Kazekage to let you take our genin tests once you recover. We've been running a little low. Before he could finish, Naruto had flung himself out of the bed, completely ruining the straps that held him and terrifying the nurse who was trying to reapply his bandages, and clamped his arms tightly around the waist of the Jounin. Do you mean it? He asked, tears threatening to spout from his eyes. I can still become a ninja? Yes, Baki said as calmly as he possibly could. But only if you let go of me right this second. Naruto instantly began bouncing all around the room, swinging his arms, kicking his feet, knocking random things over without a care, and singing Gonna be a ninja, at the top of his lungs. Uzumaki-san, stop that immediately. The nurse commanded, which Naruto didn't even hear. She frantically turned to Temari and Kankuro. Please stop him, he's not in any condition to be up. And the other patients and, oh, let me. Kankuro begged, waving his hand in the air like a student wanting to be called on by the teacher. Temari sighed and reached for her fan. Don't waste your energy. I'll do it. But dash. The puppet master tried to protest. Who's the big sister around here? She asked. Kankuro crossed his arms and pouted. You are, he mumbled. Naruto was too preoccupied with celebrating that he never felt the approaching danger until it hit him right on top of the head, sending him crashing to the floor. Before he could regain his equilibrium, he felt himself pulled back to his feet by his hair and looking into the teal eyes of Temari. What did you do that for? He whined, rubbing the small bump forming on his head. Because, you idiot, the kunoichi answered forcefully. You nearly died of sunstroke not even 6 hours ago. If you keep acting up like this you could still die, you know? But I'm excited. And I'm glad for you, but wait and be excited after you're healed, and get back into bed and rest now. But, bed! She ordered, jabbing a finger in the direction of the object in question. Much like a puppy who had just been scolded by its master, Naruto sulked back to the bed and pulled the covers up past his nose. Man, she's scarier than Sakura-chan. Man, what a pain! Kankuro growled. The three had left the hospital once everything had settled down again. Baki had gone his own way once they were out of the building, which left Temari alone to listen to her brother complain. We should have just listened to Gaara in the first place. Oh, be nice, she reprimanded him. Sure, he's loud, but I think you're overreacting a little. Kankuro glanced at her from the corner of his eye and sneered. Well, of course you would think that, Angel. Temari couldn't keep herself from blushing. Shut up. He said that while he was half dead, and he probably doesn't even know he said it. It's not like it matters. Then how do you explain the blush? I'm not blushing, she shouted, unconsciously growing even redder. Whatever, the puppet master chuckled, leaving Temari silently fuming. They walked on for a few more blocks, both praying to themselves that Gaara wouldn't be in a bad mood over being alone at home for so long. By the way, Kankuro? What, Temari? What exactly is the special meaning behind that paint of yours? Shut up, Temari. And Chapter 2. Chapter 3. What exactly are you asking of me, Baki? The large man kept his head bowed, and took a deep breath. This boy that was found yesterday, I would like to test his abilities as a shinobi. Should he pass my expectations, I humbly ask you to make him a ninja of Suna under my command, Kazekage-sama. It was next to impossible to judge the Kazekage's expression since all but his eyes were completely covered. But Baki could tell just by the narrowing of those eyes that the man was suspicious. And what makes this particular boy so special that I should allow such a thing? This boy is an outsider, someone we know nothing about. Who's to say that he's not a spy? Baki thought back to his earlier meeting with the rowdy child in the hospital, and couldn't help but smirk. No village in their right mind would send someone like him on an espionage mission. It is uncertain as of now, sir, but it seems as thought the boy left his village in a great hurry. My team and I found him passed out in the middle of the desert with no additional food, clothing, or provisions of any sort. It is our belief that the boy may have been exiled. However, there could be another possibility. An unseen eyebrow was quirked by the Kazekage. And that would be? I trust you know the tale of the monster Kyubi no Yoko? Baki asked. The unexpected question caught the yondaime off guard, but he recovered and nodded. It was a demon fox of near immeasurable power whom the yondaime of Konoha sacrificed himself to seal away within the body of an infant 12 years ago. What relevance does that carry here? When Baki didn't respond, the Kazekage's eyes narrowed even further. You can't be thinking that he is that child? He demanded. Again, I can't be certain yet, Kazekage-sama, Baki admitted. But while at the hospital, an attendant informed me that they discovered markings on the boy's stomach which were unnatural looking. I haven't had the opportunity to see it myself yet, but there is still the possibility that those markings are the seal that binds the Kyubi. The yondaime seemed taken aback by this declaration. What I saw today, sir, Baki continued in a lowered voice. In the desert, I'm positive of it. The boy was on the brink of unconsciousness, but for just the briefest of moments, he seemed to change, and I felt an evil force, a bloodlust the likes of which I've only felt in the past from Gaara. The eyes of the Kazekage suddenly hardened. You want to unleash another monster like Gaara on our village? Are you a fool? Baki shook his head. No, sir, please don't misunderstand. This boy seems to be stable, much more controlled than Gaara. I believe that with proper guidance and training, the boy can become a great asset to the land of Suna. It could be possible that he will surpass the abilities of Gaara himself. A feeling of foreboding sent a small chill through the yondaime's body. The thought of another demon weighed heavily on his chest. But if they were able to succeed with this Uzumaki boy where they had failed with, Gaara tugged his thoughts in the other direction. Baki waited on pins and needles for the Kazekage to speak again. Finally, after a long and drawn-out silence, test him. If he is deemed worthy, then I shall leave him to you. But heed my word now, Baki. If something goes wrong, I shall personally end your life. The Jounin bowed his head again before vanishing. It was mid-morning and already Temari was bored. It seemed to be the case more often than not these days. She could usually keep herself busy with missions and training, but when there was a lack of the former, and the rest of the team wasn't around for the latter, she would often find herself at a loss for what to do. Temari needed a new hobby, of that she was certain. Botany was fine, but could only hold her interest for so long. Kankuro, on the other hand, could spend hours every day tinkering with his puppets or going out and browsing for new parts and adapters that suited him. Gaara had his activities as well, though it also seemed that he could be completely content with doing nothing but sit on the roof all day and night. She knew for a long time now that she wasn't like most girls in the village, where village girls and other kunoichi could be found all the time at the local clothing and beauty shops. Temari never really felt the need. Not to boast, but she looked just fine no matter what she wore, with or without makeup, if the occasional glances from passing boys were any indication. Of course none of that really mattered anyway, since it had been years since she'd had any real sort of interaction with any boys her age. Even if there were some who were man enough to overlook the fact that she was Gaara's sister, all of the male shinobi that were around her age were pathetically weak, and the one thing that Temari looked for in a prospective boyfriend was that he be able to keep up with her, either physically or mentally. But thinking like this did nothing but depress her. Sighing, she stood up from her bed and walked out of the room. She found the stairway that led up to the roof of their home. Opening the door, she was unsurprised to find Gaara sitting on the ledge of the roof, looking out over the village at nothing in particular. Gaara? She called as she moved to stand next to him. The redhead turned stiffly and leveled a flat stare at her. What do you want? He asked bluntly. Just wanted to let you know that I'm going out for a while, so you'll have the house to yourself until me or Kankuro get back, she told him casually as she crouched down a few feet away from him. The empty stare didn't waver. Fine. Temari mentally drooped. She had been trying since she was 8 years old to get Gaara to come out of his shell and open up to her a little more, thinking that maybe if he did that he might gain a little bit of stability to his life. Years later, however, it seemed that such a thing was a lost cause. She decided to try again anyway. Have you eaten yet? She asked. I can bring something back for you. Gaara turned back to gazing out at nothing. Nothing sweet, Temari smiled. Sure thing. She stood back up and, on an afterthought, reached over and ruffled the boy's hair a little. Unfortunately, the unexpected contact caused him to flinch, and a thin veil of sand began appearing around his body. Temari immediately pulled her hand back as though it had almost been bitten by a cobra. Her friendly, big sister mask slipped and was replaced by one of sadness mixed with fear. "Sorry," she whispered. I'll be back later, okay?" Then, not waiting for a response, she jumped from the roof and didn't look back until she was more than a block away. Gaara was still not looking at her. For a while, Temari simply wandered the streets of the village with no set destination in mind. She eventually reached an area of town that served chilled soba, which was quite a hit with the inhabitants of the desert town. Stopping at the stand, she ordered a native bowl, then ordered a special bowl for Gaara. It cost her most of the pocket money she'd brought, but Gaara, unfortunately, had some expensive tastes. Better safe than sorry, she always said. As she walked back to the house, she walked by the hospital and happened to remember the boy from yesterday, Uzumaki Naruto, if she remembered correctly. She stared down at the small wrapped box in her hand, then up at the building in front of her, then back down again. What the heck? She decided. 10 minutes shouldn't hurt. I just hope Gaara isn't starving. A door cracked open, and an eyeball could be seen peeking through the opening. It looked left, then right, then up and down, before finally determining that there were no ambushes waiting on the other side. Slowly, the door creaked open further, and a heavily bandaged boy slunk into the hallway. He hadn't taken 2 steps when he heard someone coming. In a flash, he was crouched down underneath a metal gurney with a long white sheet pulled down to conceal him from the approaching person. It had seemed like a wise move, until he realized that the person was now starting to push the gurney down the hallway, forcing him to crawl on hands and knees along with it so as not to be exposed. Moving in such a way was no easy feat while so heavily wrapped to begin with. But with the repeated zigging and zagging through various hallways that the gurney was going in, he had to believe that the person either had no idea where he was going, or already knew that he was under there, and was punishing him for leaving his room. When it finally stopped and the man began walking away, he cautiously raised the sheet and glanced out. Everything seemed to be clear again. Now all he had to do was figure out where in the building he was and find the exit before anyone noticed that his room was empty. Uzumaki Naruto grinned at his small measure of victory. And people said he couldn't cut it as a ninja. Ha! Well, screw them. Here he was, trapped and isolated deep within enemy lines, and already he was practically home free. No one would be able to stop him now. Going somewhere? He froze. That voice seemed familiar for some reason. Very slowly, he turned around. Oh crap, he said before he could stop himself. It was that scary girl from the night before, standing directly in front of him, arms crossed, foot tapping, and a not-so-friendly sort of glint in her eye. Not good. Well? The girl in question prompted. Naruto swallowed hard. Bathroom? The girl quirked an eyebrow in skepticism, which sent a shiver through Naruto's body. It was insane. He hadn't known the girl for more than an hour total, and already she scared him more than any girl he'd ever known back home. Granted, aside from Sakura, he really hadn't known any of the other girls all that well anyway. You wouldn't be planning on leaving the hospital before you're completely healed, would you? She asked in a voice that was way too casual sounding to be sincere. But I am healed, he insisted, flexing his arms as if to prove it. I'm feeling fine. I'm a really fast healer. Not that fast, you're not, she replied. You were 10 feet from death's door when we found you yesterday. And let me tell you something, kid. She reached over and placed her hand firmly on his shoulder. I'm not always known for doing favors for people, so when I actually go out of my way to help somebody, that somebody better damn well appreciate what I've done for them, and not do something stupid that might make me regret helping them in the first place. Do you understand? Naruto nodded adamantly. Absolutely, Temari, was it? The girl looked slightly surprised that he'd remembered her name, but nodded nonetheless. I really appreciate you helping me and everything, but I swear I'm all better now. And I have to go train more so I can still become a genin, because if I don't then… Naruto, Temari interrupted calmly. Do you see this large fan on my back? Naruto blinked at the odd question. He examined the long black fan carefully. What about it? How much do you suppose it weighs? 50 pounds? He guessed. 55 actually, but close enough, she said. Now then, do you have any idea what I might possibly use this big, heavy fan for? Naruto was beginning to sweat, which had nothing to do with the fact that the hospital wasn't air-conditioned. Keeping yourself cool? Actually, Temari said, pulling out a much smaller paper fan from her pocket. That's what I use this fan for. And if you don't get back in that room and stay there until the doctors tell you otherwise, I'm going to use this fan to make sure you stay there even longer. Alright? With no other alternative than to surrender, Naruto grudgingly was led back to his room by the fellow blonde. Once he was back in his bed, she set Gaara's box of noodles on the table next to the bed and took a seat beside it. Good boy, she said, patting him softly on the head. She got a small chuckle out of the sour look he gave her in return. I'm not a dog, you know, he grumbled. And what are you doing back here anyway? Temari sniffed and leaned back in her chair, crossing her arms and legs. I was in the area and thought I'd see how you were. Okay. It's not like you'll end up with any real visitors out here in Suna, right? Naruto grimaced and turned his head away, making Temari feel that she must have struck a sore spot for the boy. She didn't say anything, however, and the moment passed in an awkward silence. So then tell me about yourself. Naruto turned back to face her, disbelief written all over his face. Nani? Tell me about yourself, she repeated. His shock grew. You want to know about me? Why not? She questioned. Considering the circumstances of how we met, can you blame me for being a little interested in you? Of course, Temari was already beginning to get a fairly decent picture of the boy. Just by his reactions to things that she or Baki-sensei had said to him led her to believe that he was either some sort of outcast or just someone whom nobody wanted to associate with. Now she just wanted to know why. There's really not that much to tell, he said softly. Not much to tell, or not much that you want to tell? She probed. Naruto felt his hands tighten on the sheets of his bed. This wasn't something he wanted to deal with. Talking like this was forcing him to remember, and that was the last thing he wanted to do. He just wanted to forget about Konoha, forget about Iruka-sensei and the old man and Sakura-chan and that jerk Sasuke and everyone else. He just wanted to be able to forget the past and move on with his life. But he'd never be able to do that if he had to keep reliving those painful memories every time he met someone new who wanted to know about his life. Can we please just talk about something else? He asked, trying to make it sound like he wasn't pleading. Temari studied his face for several seconds, then sighed. Alright, fine. But I do want to know just one thing first. Naruto tensed. What's that? The girl stared him directly in the eyes. Were you actually exiled for some reason, or did you just decide to leave? I don't really care about the reasons behind it, but if you're some sort of criminal or something, then I might have something to say about that. So, the blonde boy could feel his knuckles aching from clenching the sheets so tightly. I wasn't exiled. I just couldn't stay there anymore. And that's when Temari figured out where she'd been reminded of this boy before. It must have been hard for you, being all alone in a place where no one cares about you. Naruto seemed to nod before he realized what she'd just said. Then his eyes widened in shock. What? I mean, how'd? She gave him a melancholy smile. I've seen that expression on your face more times in my life than I can count. If there's one thing I'm an expert at, it's spotting the symptoms of someone who's gone through life unloved. You've got all the signs and then some. Naruto was completely flabbergasted. You mean you? Temari waved him off with a flick of her wrist. It's not me, if that's what you're thinking. But enough about that, you answered my question so we can change the subject now, right? Naruto was actually finding himself no longer wanting to change the subject. But while he could admit to being a little dense sometimes, he wasn't so thick that he couldn't tell that Temari no longer wanted to discuss the issue, so he let it go for now. Stretching his face into his signature fox face grin, he said, So that brother of yours, does he buy his own makeup or just use yours? So caught off guard was Temari that she nearly fell off her chair. For as long as she could remember, no one in Suna ever commented on Kankuro's face paint, most likely because they were smart, and feared what might befall them if they did. Still, she couldn't help but laugh. You're something else, kid, though with that kind of talk you probably won't last long out here in Suna. Naruto flung his sheets back and stood up boldly on his bed. That's what you think? I'll be the greatest ninja that Suna has ever seen. Just you wait and see. Temari raised her eyebrows and snorted at the declaration. Cocky are we? Suna's not known for its pushovers, you know? Naruto threw his fist into the air. So what? Bring em on. I swore that I'd one day become the greatest Hokage ever and earn the admiration of everyone in the village, and I never break my vow. That's my nindo. But you're not in Konoha anymore, Temari said bluntly. Naruto instantly deflated. But the kunoichi didn't even have time to think about apologizing before he was standing straight up with his arm outstretched once again. Then I'll just have to alter my vow, and become the greatest Kazekage in all of history instead. Stars were beginning to fill his eyes at this point. And then I can go back to Konoha and tell those villagers, haha. I bet you wish you hadn't been such big assholes to me now, huh? And then they'll all say, oh Naruto, how could we have been so foolish? Please forgive our stupidity and be our new Hokage. And then I'll become the first ever Kaze Hokage. He closed his eyes and stroked his chin thoughtfully, nodding in agreement with his own wisdom. Yeah, that's exactly what I'm gonna do. Temari could do nothing more than stare. Had she really just compared this guy to Gaara? She must have been out of her mind. Naruto plopped back down on his bed, grinning like a child who'd found his Christmas presents before they'd even been wrapped. So what's your goal, Temari-nichin? Temari again found herself caught completely off guard. Whether it was from the question itself or the way he'd referred to her, she wasn't sure, but she made a mental note to stop letting her guard down while around him. Well, now that you mention it, she said slowly. I guess I haven't thought much about anything long-term. And she really hadn't. Besides making sure she gained Jounin or possibly ANBU status before either of her brothers, she didn't have many other goals. Faced with this new conundrum, she placed her hand on her chin and gazed at the floor in thought. Naruto sat patiently, waiting to hear what she had to say, when he suddenly took notice of the smell of food in the room. It was a familiar sort of smell coming from the small box that Temari had brought. Had she brought that for him? If so, it would have been a small blessing, as he'd barely been able to stomach the food that the nurses had brought for him earlier. And if he was right about the smell, oh please, let him be right, Temari growled in frustration. For the first time in her life she'd realized that she had no idea what she intended to do with her life outside of being a ninja. Damn, now this was depressing. She heard. This ramen is all cold and weird looking. Gross, she frowned. That's not ramen, Baka. It's so, oh my god, you're eating Gaara's lunch. She screamed in wide-eyed horror. Naruto, with bowl and chopsticks in hand, and a single noodle hanging limply from his lips, blinked. Nani? End Chapter 3. Chapter 4. 1 week ago had marked the day that the fox demon carrier, Uzumaki Naruto, had left the village. What followed the days after had been scenes of scattered celebration among the villagers. It was never anything too obvious, but you didn't have to be a top-ranked jounin to notice the air of happiness that had risen from all over Konoha. People stayed out to all hours of the night in bars, drinking and laughing over the fact that they could all finally live in peace again. No more would they have to put up with that demon brat's antics, having to fear for the lives of themselves and their families that he would go on a killing spree at any given moment, and finally start enjoying their lives. This was the general consensus, anyway. But there was a significant amount of people who failed to share the joy of the others. For one, the owner of the Ichiraku ramen stand and his daughter were already starting to see the beginning of hard times. It had been well known that Naruto had always been their best customer, but even they didn't realize just how great he had been for them. Since Naruto's departure, they hadn't even been making a quarter of the amount that they'd used to. They hadn't had many other regulars before, but now it seemed like people were avoiding the place altogether, as if going there might somehow bring the boy back. Even worse was the case with Hyuga Hinata. Every one of the members of the Hyuga family could see a distinct difference in her. Where she had been a below-average ninja in their eyes before, she was now downright terrible. Her sparring matches against her sister Hanabi never lasted any longer than a minute. Her focus was completely off, and she seemed to have lost all motivation in even being a shinobi. None of them even considered the connection between her skilled downfall and the disappearance of the fox carrier, and so were trying to find anything to point their fingers at that might be the cause. A few concluded that it must be the genin team that she had been put in. Perhaps her teammates were somehow clouding her judgment, or her sensei wasn't pushing her hard enough. Others questioned the actions of Hayashi. The Hyuga clan was not known as a very affectionate bunch, but some of the more sympathetic members felt that it was Hayashi's overbearing harshness toward his daughter that had led to the loss of any confidence she might have once had. These comments were met with open disdain from the head of the Hyuga clan, as he claimed that he had treated Hinata no differently than Hanabi, and she was turning out just fine. If anything, the last week had caused Hayashi to become even colder to his eldest daughter. The disappointment and scorn that he had shown in the past was now in full force. So much so that Hanabi had started going out of her way to try comforting her, though no matter how much she tried she couldn't get Hinata to open up and say what was really bothering her. Her team had tried similar tactics with similar results. Not even Kurenai could figure out a way to bring Hinata out of her depression, and as the days went on, the genjutsu expert was beginning to seriously doubt Hinata's future as a shinobi. At the foot of the Hokage monument, Iruka sat staring downheartedly up at the stone faces. He'd been there for a few hours now, coming just as soon as classes had ended, just like he'd been doing for days. Villagers and shinobi alike knew not to bother with him at times like this, which was why he was rather surprised to hear the sound of approaching footsteps behind him. He shifted himself to face the newcomer. Iruka, the man greeted. Iruka grimaced. It seemed it was that time again. Good afternoon, Hokage-sama, he said flatly. Sarutobi moved over to stand next to Iruka, leaning heavily on his walking staff. He let out a groan as he lowered himself into a seated position. Iruka began absently playing with one of his kunai, twirling it on his finger, and then scrapping at the ground with it. Several minutes went by in silence before Iruka couldn't take it any longer. Is there something you wanted from me, Hokage-sama? Sarutobi took several puffs of his pipe, and then blew a small smoke ring straight up into the air. You're doing it again, Iruka. Doing what, sir? You know what, Iruka, the old man told him. You're blaming yourself for something that isn't your fault. Just like you did before. How can I not blame myself, Hokage-sama? Iruka demanded, driving his kunai into the cement next to him. If I had just let go of my stupid hate for what Naruto had inside of him and started acknowledging Naruto himself, this might not have happened. The scar-faced Chunin stared at the deep crack created by his weapon and breathed a heavy sigh. There were so many things that I could have done differently for him. Sarutobi shook his head. There were plenty of things that all of us could have done, Iruka, including myself. But sir, nobody in this entire village really took Arashi-sama's words to heart. You see, he interrupted. Naruto was meant to be the hero of Konoha for being used as a sacrificial container without even given a choice. Instead, everyone who didn't outright scorn the boy simply ignored him altogether. I wasn't much different, I'm afraid. Iruka remained silent, signifying Sarutobi to continue. I think back now when Naruto first left that orphanage, I shouldn't have allowed him to live on his own. If I had simply taken him in myself, or possibly found someone else who would be willing to do the same, how much better would he have turned out? He could have gotten the attention and guidance that he so desperately needed. The two fell into silence again. Isn't there anything more we can do? Iruka wondered out loud. Sarutobi shrugged. We've already concluded that Naruto is no longer within the boundaries of the Fire Country. The odds of finding him anywhere else at this point are all but non-existent unless some word of him reaches us. We also can't forget that there are other people outside of our village who know about the Kyuubi. If someone were to find Naruto and discover what he is, well, I'm sure you don't need to be told what could happen then. But can't we dash? Sarutobi held his hand up to silence him. However, there's one thing that we can do. The Sandaime paused again, taking another long puff of his pipe. Iruka was getting the feeling that the Hokage was doing it on purpose to torture him, but he held his tongue. Currently, we are bound through a signed peace treaty with Sunagakure and the Land of Wind. The chances that Naruto is actually in the Wind Country are slim, but if I were to send an envoy to the Yondaime Kazekage, perhaps he will agree to send a search team for us. The look of renewed hope on Iruka's face was enough that Sarutobi hated to finish his thoughts aloud. After all, even if Naruto had ended up in the Land of Wind, there was no telling if he would be in Suna, what condition he would be in, or even if he was still alive. Chances were just as likely that he'd ended up in the Land of Rain, Sound, or even Earth, which would cause serious problems given the general relationships they shared. He also had to think of a convincing story to give to the Kazekage, who no doubt would decline sending his shinobi out to search for one missing boy unless there was a very good reason for it. Forcing himself back to his feet, Sarutobi grasped his staff and glanced back up at the monument. I'll send someone out at dawn tomorrow. Thank you, Hokage-sama, Iruka said, giving him a deep bow of gratitude. The Hokage chuckled. You make it sound like I'm only doing this because you want me to, Iruka. I certainly can't speak for everyone else, but I honestly believe that it's been far too quiet around here this past week. Iruka nodded. I agree, Hokage-sama. You idiot! Are you trying to get me killed? Temari shouted in manic hysteria while furiously shaking Naruto by the front of his orange jacket. I don't know what you're talking about, dash! Naruto cried, forcing out one word at a time with each forward snap of his neck. Temari managed to calm down enough to stop shaking the boy, but still kept a tight grip on him. That soba you ate was lunch for my brother, Gaara. I promised him I'd bring food home for him, and if I don't he's gonna. She shivered just imagining what he might do. Naruto struggled unsuccessfully in breaking away from her. Frankly, he was now at a loss. Just as he was starting to think the girl was an okay person to be around, she now looked like she was ready to throw him out a window. The fact that his room had no windows made him even more worried. Don't you think you're overreact? I'm not overreacting, she screamed. There's no such thing as overreacting when it concerns Gaara. He's cruel, ruthless, bloodthirsty, and those are his better qualities. I don't even have enough money with me to buy him anything else. She gave him several more rough shakes. Why'd you have to eat it? I'm sorry. I thought it was for me, honest. Why would you think that? Temari questioned, still looking halfway delirious. Naruto began poking his index fingers together, looking about to pout. Well, you brought it here and set it down next to me and it smelled really good. Heaving a mighty sigh of despair, Temari dropped him to the floor, fell onto the bed and buried her face into a pillow. Naruto briefly entertained the idea of running while she wasn't looking, but changed his mind. Even if she was scary, and quite possibly a little unstable, he still couldn't just leave with her upset like this. But just to be safe, Temari felt like crying, and if it wasn't for basic pride in the fact that she had never openly cried in her life, she probably would have. How could she possibly express to the boy just how much danger she could very well be in over something that would appear so insignificant to anyone who didn't know Gaara? There were only a few simple rules for someone like Temari to live by. Those were, don't piss off Gaara, and if for some reason you do piss off Gaara, do everything in your power to make things better. She had promised food for Gaara, and now she had none. This was going to piss off Gaara. She had no money, and so was unable to buy him anything else. This was not going to help make things better. Temari was screwed, unless she heard and felt the bed move as Naruto sat himself down next to her. You know, Temari-nichan, I'm pretty sure it's not as bad as you think. I mean, I don't have a brother, but if I did have one, and he let someone eat my lunch, I don't think I'd be that mad. Well, maybe if it had been my limited edition premium blend ramen that I'd been saving for special occasions, I'd probably beat him up. But Temari had never really been listening to him in the first place, just staring at him as she mulled her idea around in her head. It was certainly cruel and not something she very much wanted to do, but as the old shinobi slogan went, there are a lot of times when you must do things you don't want to if you hope to survive. And Temari really wanted to survive. To believe that he'd be so upset over this, you know? Naruto continued, completely unaware that Temari hadn't heard a word he'd been saying. And besides, if you just tell him it was a misunderstanding, he'll understand, right? Maybe, Temari answered flatly. But I have a different idea than telling Gaara what happened. Naruto blinked. Oh, yep, she said with a nod. I'm going to have you tell him, instead. Naruto rubbed his chin. Well, I guess that's what? Why not? You're the one who ate it without asking, after all. Naruto began edging himself away from her until he slipped off the bed, then continued to slide back until his back was pressed against the wall. But why you said he was cruel, ruthless and unstable, and bloodthirsty, Temari reminded him. So why are you trying to make me tell him if he's that bad? He asked. Temari shrugged. Better you than me, I suppose? Besides, you seem to keep forgetting that it's your fault. Why should I take the blame for you? Naruto gulped as he watched the blonde reach for her fan. But you're his sister. He'll be nicer to you if you do it, Temari snorted. Yeah, that would be the day. Sorry Naruto, but I'm really left with no other options. It's either you take your punishment like a man, or my brother gets grumpy and rains terror and destruction upon me and the rest of Suna. Now are you going to do the right thing willingly, or do I have to hog-tie you and deposit you at my brother's feet? Naruto's sweat dropped hard. Can I just say something? It's not going to change my mind, but what is it? I have money. I don't what? Naruto shakily pulled out a small green frog-shaped wallet and held it up for Temari to see. You can have some if you want. For a second, Temari didn't respond at all. Then before he even knew it, Naruto was again being lifted off the ground by his shirt, and the money pouch had been ripped from his hand. You dumbass! Why didn't you mention that before? I was having a conniption here, damn it! The blonde boy attempted to apologize, but suddenly felt his body shifting into a different position. It took him a moment to realize what it was. Temari was now hugging him, apparently out of sheer relief. This is great, she cried. Now Gaara won't even have to know and no one has to die. Got too tight, Naruto squeaked out, right before disappearing in a puff of smoke, leaving Temari clutching at nothing in his absence. Huh! The kunoichi stared in shock at the place where Naruto had just been standing. She looked all around the room, but saw no trace of him. Then she noticed something even more disturbing. The money pouch had disappeared along with him. Meanwhile, the real Uzumaki Naruto had just about reached the front door of the hospital. Thank Kami for Kagebunshin, he thought to himself. When Temari had first started freaking out about him eating the soba, he'd felt that it was definitely time to leave. So the moment Temari had buried her face in that pillow and taken her attention off of him, he'd created a clone and silently slipped out the door. Of course, he'd stay just outside so he could still hear where the conversation would end up going. If she had calmed back down, then he would have gone back inside. But when he heard her talking about handing him over to her unstable brother, he felt the time was right for a strategic retreat. Whatever happened after that didn't matter, just so long as he got away before she noticed. Man, just when I think I have people figured out, he muttered as he pushed open the door. He had only taken a single step outside when he felt the building shake from a terrifying roar that sounded a lot like someone screaming, Uzumaki. The fox boy shuddered. Damn, Kankuro walked along the sandy Suna road at a leisurely pace. A large sack was slung over his shoulder, and a small white box was gripped in his hand. Today was turning out just great. He managed to find the perfect piece needed to upgrade Karasu. He hadn't had to mess with his deranged brother or his bossy sister all day, and he'd made 4 children run away in fear just by walking up to them and saying boo. Life was good. Reaching into his box, he pulled out a stick of yakitori and began munching on it happily, completely oblivious to the world around him. So oblivious, in fact, that he barely managed to move out of the way as an orange blur ran by him. Looking back, Kankuro saw the blur leap up onto a rooftop and continue on his way as though he were being chased by hellhounds. Little punk, he grumbled. You just feel lucky that you caught me in a real good mood, or I'd. Whatever Kankuro might have done was lost to the world, however, as at that moment a second person ran by. This time he wasn't able to move in time and the two collided. Kankuro sat up and snarled. Damn it all! Doesn't anybody look where they're going anymore? I've got the right mind to Temari. The puppet master's sister sat up as well, rubbing her lower back slightly. Sorry, Kankuro, but did you see that boy go by here? Kankuro blinked in confusion. Could we be any less specific, please? Temari scowled at him. You know, Naruto, the one from yesterday. I can't let him, she trailed off as she noticed a small white box lying on the ground beside her. She opened the top and her eyes widened. A gift from heaven! She cried. She snatched the box up and ran off, not even caring if she found Naruto again or not. Hey! That's my lunch, Temari! Kankuro called as he gathered his stuff up and gave chase. Naruto continued on through the village, not certain but also not wanting to look if Temari was still after him. Instead, as he bounded from rooftop to rooftop, he pondered about his current situation. He figured that his best bet was to leave Suna before he attracted any more negative attention to himself. The last thing he needed was a repeat of Konoha. It was a shame though, Temari and her makeup-wearing brother and their sensei hadn't seemed so bad yesterday, but if they were to find out what he was, so his mind was made up. He would leave and try to start again in a new village, possibly a normal village where he wouldn't have to worry about ninja coming after him. Then he'd create his own training routine and become super powerful, and he could be the village guardian against invaders and dangerous creatures. Yeah, that could work. Maybe it wasn't Hokage, but at least he'd be loved and respected. But he still faced a problem. How was he going to get out of here? The village was in the middle of the desert, and the last time he tried traveling through the desert he'd almost died. Maybe he could find a guide or a large tank of water that he could carry with him. Risking a look behind him, he noticed that the fan wielder was nowhere to be seen, which made him relax a little. At least now he could work out a plan in peace. Just as he kicked off from another building, he turned back to face forward. Warning senses perked up within him as he saw that there was someone standing on the roof that he was headed toward. In fact, he was going to land on top of him at this angle. Hey, watch out! he shouted to the red-headed boy. The boy didn't move or even look like he's heard him. Panicked, Naruto began flailing his arms and legs around in a vain attempt to change his mid-flight course. When he realized it wasn't helping, he squeezed his eyes closed and awaited the impact. When the impact did come, it wasn't anything like Naruto thought it might have felt. Instead of colliding with the relatively soft body of another human, he felt a much more forceful contact, like he jumped into a cement wall or something. The force of the collision dizzied the blonde, causing him to fall hard onto his backside. He shook his head a little to clear his vision, but found himself staring at something peculiar, to say the least. As sand? He questioned in disbelief. But it was true, there really did seem to be a small wall of sand before him that most certainly hadn't been there a second ago. Hesitantly, he reached forward to touch it, but pulled back as the wall crumbled away to nothing and he found himself staring up into the pale face of the boy he's almost hit. Naruto jumped back to his feet, rubbing his slightly sore face as he studied the boy before him. The boy might have looked a bit comical if he didn't have such a mean look on his face. He didn't seem to have any eyebrows, but he did have some sort of thick, dark rings all around his eyes, making Naruto think of a panda, or a raccoon or something. The two boys stared at one another in silence, one with a piercing glare, the other with an apologetic grin. Sorry about that, Naruto said, rubbing the back of his head in embarrassment. I wasn't really looking where I was going, and I didn't see you there, so my bad, okay? The redhead continued glaring, making Naruto all the more uncomfortable. Something about this guy seemed to make his skin crawl. Are you here to help me prove my existence? The boy asked. Naruto tilted his head in confusion. What does that mean? The boy reached up and pulled the cork from the giant gourd on his back. Sabaki. Suddenly, sand began pouring from the mouth of the gourd, and before Naruto knew what to make of it, the sand had snaked itself through the air and began wrapping itself around his body. Hey! What's happening? He cried, struggling to break free. Let go of me. But it was no use, as the last thing Naruto saw before the sand consumed his entire body was the gleam of evil in the eyes of the boy. As Naruto struggled to break out of his prison, the Kyuubi stirred. Lifting its head, the fox inhaled deeply. It had long ago managed to block out the rancid stench of decay and mold from the sewers that it was trapped in, but now a new, yet more familiar scent was reaching him. A feral chuckle that could have easily been misinterpreted as a snarl escaped the Kyuubi's throat. So you're that one? Heh, weak as ever, I see. No fun for me here. And with that being said, the Kyuubi laid its head down and went back to sleep. Gaara was doing his own evil laughing as he slowly raised the fool trapped in his Sabaki higher up into the air. It would be much more entertaining and enjoyable for him if everyone in the village were to see the slaughter that he was about to perform with their own eyes. It had been almost 3 days since the last time he had taken life from this village. It wouldn't do to have anyone forget that he was still among them. The voice within him growled at him to hurry up and kill the boy. There was no sense in adding needless suspense to it. Fear was one thing, but blood was what it truly desired at the moment. Gaara pushed the voice away. The casket of sand was now a good 50 above the rooftop, giving a good view to anyone who happened to turn their eyes to the sky. A gleam appeared in his eyes. Once again, he would see the sands of Sunagakure stained red with the blood of one of its own. He began clenching his hand into a fist, Sabaku, and then he stopped. Something seemed odd. The sand that held his prey seemed to be expanding. Even from that high up, Gaara would see that the blob of sand was growing in size. But why? Could it have been that his prey was fighting back? That thought sent a shiver of pleasure up the boy's spine. How long had it been since his prey had fought back? Too long, much too long. This was wonderful. Perhaps he could finally have fun. Lowering his hand, Sabaku no Gaara watched on, waiting to see exactly what would happen next. Temari and Kankuro walked along back toward their home, the former humming cheerfully to herself, the latter sporting a large bump that was visible even through his black hood. Why didn't you just tell me you needed it for Gaara? He grumbled. I told you it was a matter of life and death, she retorted. You still didn't have to use your stupid fan. You don't see me whipping out Karasa every time I want to prove a point. That's because you hate the thought of me smashing up your little toys. And don't think that I never notice when you use him to chase after those kids who play down the street from us. What I do in my free time is my business, and you've completely missed my point. He shouted, shoving his hands deep into his pockets. And you owe me lunch, too. Temari grinned despite herself. Suddenly, it was like the last hour of her life hadn't even happened. Everything was back to normal again. By all accounts, that was probably a good thing. Then, as a stray cloud passed in front of the sun, she happened to look up. Oh shit, she swore. Kankuro glanced at her in surprise. What's wrong? She pointed upward, and he followed her gaze up to the sphere of sand floating high up in the air. Oh shit, he concurred. Why already? We just got back from that mission. He should be satisfied for a week at most. Temari remained silent, but was thinking the same thing. After Gaara killed enough, he usually didn't kill again for several days, and it had only been 2 days ago when he had single-handedly massacred close to 20 shinobi. That should have been enough to sate his bloodlust for a week at least, just as her brother had said. The only option would have been if someone had somehow provoked or angered Gaara. God, she hoped that wasn't it. If it was, then it was most likely her fault for taking so long with his food. Was the imminent death of whoever that innocent person was resting on her shoulders? Temari! Kankuro! The siblings turned to the source of the voice, not surprised to see Baki running toward them. You saw it too, huh? Kankuro asked, even though it wasn't so much a question as it was a statement. Baki nodded. Any idea who it is or why Gaara's killing again so soon? They both shook their heads, though they both subconsciously glanced down at the box in Temari's hand. Baki let out a distressful sigh. Nothing we can do then except wait for him to calm back down. While Baki and Kankuro kept their eyes focused on the floating sand, Temari diverted her eyes to the ground. She, herself, had already killed several times in her life, but it had always been during missions, against people who knew how to defend themselves. Somehow, watching Gaara do the same even worse things to innocent people like this would almost make her feel ill. She waited, not sure what for, just some sort of signal that the carnage might be over. What she got was a noise of interest and confusion from Kankuro and Baki. Curious, she looked back up just in time to see the sand explode. Only this time, unlike every other time she had seen it, the sand had exploded outward rather than inward. And what she saw after that was, "Oh my God," she uttered. "What in Suna's name?" Baki demanded. That disgusting orange color," Kankuro said, mouth fully agape. "Don't tell me." Gaara's eyes widened in wonder as the sky above him began overflowing with orange-clad people. 2, 8, 19, 37, 71, 115. And still they kept pouring out until finally he couldn't keep up with counting anymore. They landed all around him, on the roof with him, on the surrounding roofs, all along the streets between them. When the last clone landed, Gaara felt himself resembling a small island within an ocean of orange. One of the Narutos stepped forward, breathing deeply and visibly sweating from the exertion of creating so many clones. He faced Gaara, bearing his longer-than-average canines at him. "I've had a lot of crap happen to me in my life," he informed the Sannin. "Especially in the last week alone. But something like this, don't think I'm gonna just let this go. I don't know what your problem with me is, but if it's a fight you're looking for, then I'll be more than happy to kick your raccoon-eyed ass." If Gaara felt any intimidation at the challenge at all, he hid it incredibly well. In fact, he was grinning from ear to ear, and not in a very friendly way. "I think I'm really going to enjoy killing you," he said. Naruto and every single one of his clones cracked their knuckles. "Just try it." And Chapter 4. Chapter 5. The citizens of Sunagakure can largely be categorized as a despondent group. On the surface, they seem no different than any other community. Even if one were to have a passing conversation with one of them, they still wouldn't seem so abnormal. But when it came right down to it, the entire populace of Suna were a shaken, depressive, and all-around pessimistic bunch. This, of course, was the direct result of living in a village with a borderline psychopathic killer. While the direct source of the villagers' discontent wasn't spoken of much, they could be incredibly vocal about political matters. Not many commoners of Suna thought much of the current Kazekage, while even fewer cared anything at all for the daimyo of the Land of Wind. After all, it had been these two figureheads of the land who were directly responsible for creating the monster known as Sabaka no Gaara. To this day, it was considered taboo to even mention the boy's name, the general feeling being that he might hear you and kill you for talking about him. If the villagers had ever stopped to consider it, they might realize that the only times that Gaara killed was against a potential assassin, or if a villager did something to anger him, such as scream and run away at the mere sight of him. When the people began noticing the rising ball of sand above their heads at that moment, everyone came to the same conclusion: it would be best to get far away, just in case one innocent life wasn't enough for Gaara on this day. So imagine the shock everyone had felt upon seeing the sandy prison burst open, sending a tidal wave of orange down onto the city. The added shock of hearing the mass of identical strangers declare a battle against the resident demon container was almost too much for the majority to take. But even then, no one even entertained the thought that this stupidly brave stranger might stand a chance. "Go!" Naruto commanded his clone army. Gaara stood, stoic-faced and cross-armed, as a dozen clones lunged toward him, only to be effortlessly flung away by a brush of his sand. The redhead was surprised, not that he'd show it, that the clones surrounding him were indeed physical rather than simple illusions. It didn't matter, of course. 1 or 1,000, he'd destroy them all just like he'd always done, without even trying. Naruto growled in frustration as several of his attacking clones poofed out of existence. How does he control sand like that? He's not even forming seals. He scratched his head in thought, then snapped his fingers. All right, new plan. Hit him from every side at once. He can't block all of you. And again, Gaara stood unmoving as an even larger group moved to surround him. Calmly, he raised his right hand and pointed his index finger upward. The sand that had been swirling around the ground around him quickly rose up and molded together into a small dome around his body. All of the clones blinked in confusion. "What's he doing?" one asked. "How should I know?" Another answered. "Maybe he's scared." A third suggested. "Yeah, he's hiding from us in there." Still another said with a assured laugh. "Who cares?" The commanding Naruto demanded impatiently. "Break it down, and show him who he's dealing with." "Right." The others all shouted back, pumping their fists in the air. The swarm of approximately 20 Narutos attacked the sand dome, punching, kicking, slashing and stabbing at it with kunai. but nothing seemed to be making a dent in it. All at once, they rallied, preparing to deliver a single, combined blow onto the shield. But their fists had barely made contact with the sand barrier before dozens of thick spikes erupted from it, impaling each clone several times and forcing them to disappear as well. Naruto ground his teeth in a mixture of anger and nervousness. Damn it, how the hell do I beat that? He questioned to himself. But before he could contemplate further, he saw several ripples begin traveling across the surface of the sand dome. He cautiously crouched down into a defensive position as several new clones jumped to the rooftop beside him to take the place of those that had been defeated already. As the dome continued to ripple and shudder, Naruto came up with an idea. He pulled one of his clones over to him and whispered something into his ear. The clone gave a thumbs up and jumped back off the roof. Naruto turned back and barely had time to shield himself as the ball of sand began firing out like bullets in all directions. Clones began vanishing right and left. Villagers that were watching from the streets below began running for their lives, though no many got away completely unharmed. Several rooftops away, Baki, Kankuro and Temari were ducked down behind the safety of the kunoichi's open fan. When the hell did he learn to do that? Kankuro demanded, flinching as a sand bullet flew an inch past his left ear. Baki mentally cursed. He needed to calm Gaara down quickly. The longer the fight lasted, the greater the certainty that Naruto would be killed, and after getting the word from the Kazekage, Baki couldn't afford to let that happen. Unfortunately, it would be nearly impossible to convince Gaara to stop at this point. What could he do? Naruto's body shuddered as he forced himself back up to his feet. None of the sand bullets that hit him had been forceful enough to draw blood, but he could still feel several welts forming across his body. Looking around, he saw that nearly all of his shadow clones had been defeated, leaving only 3 or 4 remaining. How does he do it? He kept wondering to himself. It's like he controls the sand without even trying and he can use it to attack or defend. He glared at his opponent, who was still standing before him, looking rather bored while the sand continued to swirl around his body. But I'm not giving up yet. You struggled much better than the others, Gaara informed him. But you are still weak. Your only use now is offering me your blood. Naruto grinned. Think again, raccoon eyes. Gaara's eyes widened in surprise as a small hole burst open beneath him, and a hand reached through and grabbed him by his pants leg. Instantly the sand began pouring through the hole, attempting to smother the clone below. This is it, Naruto muttered. Do it. The 2 clones to his sides each grabbed him by his arms. Together they swung him backward then flung him forward in a slingshot fashion, giving him a boost of speed in the direction of Gaara. Hey, he's not even looking at me now. There's no way that sand will stop me this time. Got you! The blonde shouted, throwing his fist forward. Yo ph! Gaara lifted his head back up, finding himself staring into a twitching fist a mere centimeter from his face. The small wall of sand that had erected itself before him shifted and flung his would-be attacker away. Naruto collided with his 2 remaining clones, which promptly vanished, leaving him alone against Gaara. Damn, he grunted. So close. Damn, Temari sighed. Too close. She slid back and leaned her back against her propped-up fan, taking several deep breaths to slow her raging heartbeat. The situation was nuts. If Gaara could just kill Naruto quickly and get it over with, it would be so much easier to calm him back down without him becoming an immediate threat to anyone else. The longer the fight dragged on, the more chance there was that he would awaken. But on the other hand, she honestly didn't want to see Gaara kill the boy. It may have only been yesterday that she first met Uzumaki Naruto, but with the interaction that they had shared since, she had to admit that there had been a little bit of bonding between them. It was nothing huge by any means, but just the fact that they had shared a few conversations was enough to give him a high place in her life. After all, it had been years since Temari had been able to consider someone outside of her family a friend, and now that she'd found one in Naruto, the last thing she wanted was to see him die, least of all by her own brother's hand. Unfortunately, as a shinobi, it was just something that she was apparently going to have to deal with. What is Gaara doing? Kankuro asked. He never plays with his enemies this long. Hell, he doesn't play with them at all. He could have killed that idiot 10 times over by now. If he keeps wasting time like this, he's just gonna get more anxious. Once again, Naruto staggered back to his feet, while Gaara watched in silence. Naruto did not want to admit it, but he was really reaching the end of his rope. Nothing was working against that stupid sand. There was only one thing left he could think of trying. Slowly, he raised his hands to form a seal, and that was when a very brave villager decided to speak up. Get him! Kill that stinking demon! The man shouted. Yeah, kill the damn monster for us! Another from the crowd added. Gaara shot a death-laced glare at the crowd, forcing all of them to flinch away in fright. Naruto, however, completely froze up in wide-eyed dread. They know? Even all the way out here they know? How? If Gaara was curious or even took notice of his foe's sudden panic attack, it didn't show. Raising his arms, he parted his sand in 2 directions. The streams of sand flew outward in wide arches, then veered back in again, closing in on Naruto from his left and right sides. Naruto didn't seem to have any intentions of avoiding them. When the 2 streams collided, it sent a wide blast of sand in all directions, clouding the rooftop battleground from all onlookers. Though everyone had already begun fearing the worst, they watched on timorously to see if the boy might have miraculously survived. As the sand cloud settled, a small gasp escaped amongst the crowd. Temari and Kankuro stared at the scene, then at each other, then back again. What? Temari muttered. The hell? Her brother finished for her. Gaara did not look pleased. What are you doing? He demanded, malice filling his tone. Baki slowly set a very surprised Naruto back down, keeping a firm grip on the boy's shoulder. Despite his earlier fears of tempting the redhead's temper, the Jounin stood determinedly and spoke in a clear voice. Please forgive me, Gaara, he said. But by decree of your father, Kazekage-sama, I cannot allow you to kill this boy. Decree? Temari stammered. From our old man? Kankuro added in disbelief. Gaara's face twitched in anger. And why should I care? Baki stepped in front of Naruto, holding his hands up in a peaceful gesture. Gaara, you know that I don't have the abilities to stop you from doing the things that you do, but you have to listen to reason. You can't disobey orders from the yondaime. Naruto stood in silence, hardly able to believe his eyes. His life had just been saved by someone he barely even knew, and unless he'd misheard, the Kazekage himself had personally demanded he be left alive. But why? If everyone here already knew that the Kyuubi was inside him, they'd be wanting to burn him at the stake or something, wouldn't they? I implore you, Gaara, Baki continued. Promise me that you'll refrain from trying to kill this boy. Gaara's glare was sharp enough to cut steel, but he made no movement. Even his sand had stopped moving about on its own and was now settled on the roof, no different from any of the rest of the sand in the area. A long and tense silence hung in the air around them. No one even dared move, lest they catch the sudden, furious attention of an angry Gaara. Finally the sands whipped back up, but rather than stretching out to attack Naruto and Baki, it slithered and receded back into the large gourd on the boy's back. I promise, he declared. Baki, as well as everyone else, began letting out breaths that they'd barely been aware of holding. To think about it, Gaara continued, replacing the cork into the gourd's hole. Baki frowned. He couldn't push the issue any further at this point. At least Gaara was calm again. He really couldn't ask for more than that. Giving a final glance to Naruto and Baki, Gaara turned to the rooftop where his two elder siblings were cautiously perched. Temari! He called forcefully. Suppressing a shudder, the two shinobi jumped over, joining the other three. Temari did her best to not look half as scared as she felt under the glare of her brother. Why yeah, Gaara? He didn't answer, just held his hand out to her expectantly. Temari stared at the outstretched hand dumbly, until it dawned on her. Quickly, she pulled out the box of yakitori and handed it to him. She looked on as he opened the box and examined the contents inside. Slowly, he pulled a stick out and began munching on it as he turned away from them. Don't take so long next time, he growled before disappearing back into the house. The moment the boy was out of sight it was like everyone suddenly deflated. Temari dropped to her knees, Kankuro leaned backward, supporting himself against Karasu, and Baki ran a hand over the visible side of his face, wiping beads of sweat away. With everything calming down, the crowd began to dissipate as well, going back to their daily lives or just getting far away from this particular area. Temari sighed heavily as she turned to Naruto. You okay? She asked tentatively. I guess so, he answered, rubbing a few of the bruises he'd just gained. What the hell, kid? Kankuro demanded. You have the ability to create 500,000 clones of yourself, but you tell us you're not even a genin yet? I admit I don't know much about Konoha, but those exams can't possibly be that hard. Naruto rubbed the back of his head in discomfort. Well, I actually learned the Kage Bunshin after I failed the exam, but, Kankuro, Temari, please leave us, Baki commanded. There are a few things that I need to discuss with Naruto in private. Oh sure, why not? Kankuro sniffed. We certainly aren't in any hurry to get a few answers out of the one, and to my knowledge, only guy to ever fight with Gaara and still be able to give said answers after it was over. No siree, just go on and leave us kids in the dark. Though you know you're horribly abusing your sensei-student relationship rights by doing this, you can ask him whatever you want when I'm finished with him. Beat it. Yeah, we're going, the puppet master grumbled. But just remember, if you need help with the interrogation, Karasu and I are right inside. The word interrogation made Naruto shiver, but the fan connecting upside Kankuro's head that followed managed to cheer him back up a bit. Temari gave him one last looking over before she grabbed her stunned brother and dragged him into the house behind her. Now alone with the half-hidden faced Jounin, Naruto found himself at a loss for thought of what might happen next. Uzumaki Naruto, Baki began. There are several things that I feel I need to speak with you about, but before I start, I need you promise that you will hear me out until the end before making irrational judgments. Will you do that? Not seeing anything else he could do in the situation, Naruto nodded. Baki mentally sighed. This part would be difficult. He had to gain Naruto's trust now, otherwise everything could be ruined, but he also had to worry about saying the right things without saying too much. He decided a simple question would be best to start with. Naruto, what prompted this fight between you two? The blonde boy actually seemed embarrassed by the question. Well, I was running, you see, and not really looking where I was going. And I kinda ran into him. Ran into his sand, I guess. Anyway, I tried apologizing but then he said something about existing or whatever and trapped me in that sand of his, and, Baki nodded. I apologize on his behalf. Gaara isn't the most rational of people. Something nagged at the back of Naruto's head. Gaara. Why was that name familiar? Then it clicked. Wait, you mean that was Gaara? The same Gaara as Temari's ruthless, cold-blooded, unstable brother? There's only one Sabaka no Gaara, Baki said simply. Naruto shuddered. No wonder Temari was freaked out by that guy. And it really scared him that someone as scary as Temari could possibly be scared of someone else. You seemed very disturbed when the villagers began shouting about monsters and demons, Baki stated, catching Naruto completely off guard and unable to keep the fear from his face. If Baki had any doubts about what Naruto might be before, they were all gone now. He was positive that he was right. The boy looked ready to run at any given moment. Naruto, he said calmly. I don't want you to misunderstand. Those people were not talking about you, they were talking about Gaara. More confirmation, as Naruto's face changed to one of confusion and possible relief. I know that, Baki continued. Because aside from the Kazekage-sama, myself, and a select few other high-ranking shinobi, there's no one else here in Suna who knows about the Kyuubi. And even quicker than before, the confusion turned back to fear. You look terrified, Baki informed him calmly. I'm not him, Naruto stammered. Baki smirked slightly. You're lying, Naruto. Badly? You are the one whose body holds the Kyuubi no Yoko, of that there's no doubt anymore. Shit, shit. It's happening all over again. Damn, isn't there anywhere I can go without having to worry? But really, you have no reason to fear me, boy. About being hated and hunted after like a wild, he blinked. What? Baki gave him what appeared to be a reassuring smile. In my opinion, you keep thousands upon millions of lives safe by having the Kyuubi sealed inside your body. For that, you deserve nothing short of my utmost admiration and respect. Naruto watched, completely dumbfounded, as Baki gave him a small bow. It took him several attempts at speaking before he finally found his voice. Are you as serious? Baki nodded. You also seem quite stable with your actions. Do you ever have trouble controlling him? He shook his head. Nah. I mean, I never even found out that it was inside me before. Before you left Konoha and came here, Baki finished. That made the most logical sense now. Of course the boy would feel overwhelmed at news like that. His actions and comments also strongly suggested that the majority of Konoha detested the boy, which slipped in the final pieces of the puzzle surrounding the mystery of Naruto. Now that it all seemed to be figured out, there was only one thing left to do. Reaching into his vest, he pulled out a small object made of cloth and metal and tossed it to the startled boy. Here. Naruto stared down at the object in his hand, a small strip of cloth with a metal plate attached to the center of it. A crude symbol of an hourglass was carved into the plate. He stared at the headband for several long seconds. This is someone as young as you with such a mastery over Kage Bunshin is a very rare find, Baki explained. Also, anyone who can hold out in a fight against Gaara more than deserves a place in our ranks. The blonde's body began to tremble. Then as of this moment, I declare you, Uzumaki Naruto, an official shinobi of Sunagakure. From this day forward, you will be a student under me. The floodgate of emotion that had been building up within Naruto finally burst open with Baki's declaration. With tears of joy streaming down his face, and his new Hittite clutched tightly in his fist, he jumped straight into the air with a loud cry of victory. Yada ah! Ninja ninja ninja! Baki watched in mild amusement as the boy jumped from one rooftop to the next and back again. He had zero time to react before Naruto leapt forward and tackled him in an overly tight hug. I'm really a ninja? He asked. Baki pried the boy's arms from his waist and sat back up. Yes, Naruto. And as your new sensei, I'm hereby making a rule prohibiting you from any future physical contact with me. Naruto chuckled and wiped the remaining tears from his eyes. Sorry, but don't worry. On this Suna Hittite, I swear to become the greatest shinobi that the Land of Wind has ever seen, Baki huffed. The boy was quickly showing himself to be a nuisance, but at least he had the proper enthusiasm. I'll be holding you to that claim, boy, he informed him. Yes, sir, he answered with a salute. I won't let you down, Baka-sensei. The Jounin's eyebrow twitched. My name is Baki. Naruto blinked. Yeah, what did I say? Never mind. Are you ready for your first official mission? The boy's eyes widened. Mission? Already, really? Familiarize yourself with the village, pay your respects to your Kazekage, and come back here to meet with your new teammates. Naruto deflated a little. That's all it is? Darn, I thought I'd get some seriously big and difficult mission on my first day as a ninja to match my superior abilities or, fine, do it all in 1 hour or I revoke your genin rank. Yee. Okay, I'll do it. He formed a quick seal. Kage Bunshin no Jutsu. 12 clones appeared around him. Naruto began shouting out commands. You three, he pointed to one group. Scout that way. You three that way. You three over there, and you three over there. Go 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 go. The 4 groups of clones took off in their given direction while the remaining Naruto looked around frantically for the Kazekage's tower. Where is it? Where is it? Is that it? He asked, pointing to the largest building in sight. Seeing the nod from Baki, he took off in a shot, leaving the Jounin to sigh bemusedly. After all that he had been through that day, he still had enough energy to jump around like a child and create additional Kage bunshins. He briefly wondered just how much energy the boy would have when it really mattered. Baki couldn't help but heave another deep sigh. All in all, and through the additional complications with Gaara, he managed to accomplish his own mission. He had gained the boy's trust and made him a shinobi. Now all that was left was to train him, and see if the plan he had formed with the Kazekage would pan out or not. Either way, he was pretty sure that he'd be ending up with a very painful headache before it was all said and done. The fourth Kazekage was not having a good day. What had started off as a mere irritant with Baki and his cockamamie plan with that supposed QB container had only been the beginning of a downward spiral. Later that morning brought a letter from the daimyo stating that several more budget cuts in the shinobi missions files were being taken again, as if they hadn't been run nearly dry at this point as it was. And now word had reached him that someone had gotten into a fight with Gaara. The words fight with Gaara had confused him greatly. No one ever got into fights with Gaara. People simply got killed by Gaara. There was never any fighting to it. He was also bothered as the only time incidences like this tended to turn up were if he had issued another assassination attempt on the boy, which he hadn't bothered to try for a few months now, given the futility of it all in the past. He was on edge, and really wishing for a nice indefinite vacation to some foreign land. If anyone else did something to further ruin his day, well, that was when the doors to his office flew open. "Hey, old man Kazekage." Thuk 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 thuk. The intruder blinked in shock, finding himself pinned very securely to the hallway wall by several kunai. The Kazekage turned and calmly approached the young boy, removing another kunai from his sleeve and extending it to the boy's throat. As someone at the tender age of 40, I would hardly consider myself an old man, the boy gulped. Sorry, I guess you probably wouldn't be as old man Hokage. Hey, my bad. Good. Now then, who are you and why shouldn't I kill you for barging into my office like this? The boy began speaking very fast. I'm Uzumaki Naruto from Konoha, only I'm not from Konoha anymore, and Baki-sensei made me a genin and told me to come see you, and here I am, so don't hurt me, I'm fragile. The yandame examined the boy. So you're the one that Baki spoke of, are you? Naruto nodded. Baki-sensei said that you knew about my condition? The man's face twisted in shock. Then you really are the Naruto nodded again, causing the yandame's thoughts to break apart. He never would have believed that Baki's guess would be true, yet unless this boy was lying, he was staring face to face with the Hauser of the Kyuubi. I see, he said softly, trying to regather his thoughts. Then are you stable? Naruto tilted his head at the surprising question. I guess so. You don't have problems controlling the demon's will? No, not really. I mean, there was one time before I left Konoha where he gave me some of his power, but that's about it, I think. The Kyuubi cooperates with him? If that were true, it could almost be too perfect. They could have all the manpower they needed with just one ninja, and, hoping he wasn't jinxing himself to bad fortune by thinking it, maybe he could be the one to rid the land of Gaara and the Shikaka once and for all. His thoughts were interrupted by a low growling sound. Glancing around the room, his eyes finally landed on the boy's stomach, while the boy blushed in embarrassment. Sorry, I haven't eaten a real meal in a while, he said with a nervous chuckle. Indeed. Still pondering possibilities, he removed the kunais with a single wave of his hand, and backed up as the boy fell forward to the floor. If Baki has deemed you worthy of our cause, then so be it. You have my official blessing to train and carry out missions under the banner of Sunagakure. Now if you will excuse me, I have many pressing matters to return to. Yes sir, older Kazekage-sama, Naruto answered, hoping he wouldn't catch his slip. He grinned a truly happy grin. This had turned out to be one of the best days of his life. He made a somewhat friend with temari, became a ninja, and to top it off, either his sensei or the Kazekage had a problem with him being the QB container. There was absolutely nothing in this world that could make this day horrible for him. As he turned to go, his stomach growled again. Hey Kazekage-sama? Do you know where I could find a decent ramen shop? The yandame turned back to him with a light frown. I'm sorry Uzumaki, but Sunagakure does not import ramen, nor do we have any shops that make it. Kankura looked up from his workbench. Slowly he got up and walked into the living room, where temari was resting. Hey sis, did you hear that? Hear what? The kunoichi asked. That blood-curdling scream that sounded like someone whose body was getting crushed little by Gaara's sand. Temari shrugged. I don't know, but Gaara's in his room by himself. Kankuro scratched his chin. Weird. Oh well. And with that, he returned to his room. End Chapter 5. Chapter 6. Sensei, you know I respect your decisions and everything that you've taught us in the past, but I now find myself wondering if you haven't gone senile. Your concerns for my mental well-being are duly noted and duly ignored, Kankuro, Baki calmly stated. But come on. The boy complained, pacing back and forth around the living room area in aggravation. You made that guy a genin? And to top it off, you put him on our team? He does have a bit of a point, Baki-sensei, Temari commented from her spot on the couch. After all, genin teams are only supposed to have 3 members and a jounin, and it just wouldn't be fair to make Kankuro leave just to make room for Naruto. Exactly. Kankuro nodded. And not only that, wait, what? What do you mean make Kankuro leave? Well, it's obvious, Temari stated as though it were written on the walls. You're the weakest link of our team. Weakest link my face paint. He retorted. Just because you're older doesn't mean you're better than me. Being older doesn't mean it, she admitted. But my 97 sparring victories over you certainly do. How many times have you gotten the better of me? I've lost count. Then you certainly can't count very high. Baki stood back, resting against the wall as he watched the exchange in annoyance. This is why he never had children. Having already taught the two for some time now, he'd learned that it was simply easier to let them get their squabbling out of their system. Otherwise they wouldn't be willing to listen to anything he tried to tell them. Hearing the break in the bickering, he felt it safe to speak up. If we could get back to the matter at hand, please? Kankuro shot one last dirty look at his sister before turning back to his sensei. What's up with our old man? The last time a ninja from another country came to live in Suna he got so paranoid that he wanted the guy executed. Now he's taking this idiot nobody and as a shinobi he snapped his fingers. Just like that? In case you forgot, Kankuro, the jounin said with a slight edge to his voice. That idiot nobody just survived a fatal encounter with your brother. Only because you bailed him out. He has also shown himself to be an expert at Kagebunshin. Creating as many as he did all at once would require an enormous amount of chakra. I don't think I could create that many. The puppet master just snorted. Who needs bunshins anyway? Karasa's more reliable than that, Baki sighed. What he wouldn't give for a group of not-so-stubborn bra students. Begrudgingly, he turned his attention to Temari. You've been fairly quiet, Temari. Do you have any objections to letting Uzumaki join you? Temari shrugged. I don't know. I guess as long as he doesn't slow us down or start messing things up for us, I don't really mind. Of course you don't, Kankuro grumbled. What more convenient way to spend time with the only guy who's ever paid you a compliment? Would you stop swinging that thing at me? Temari leaned back on the couch again, glaring at her brother and keeping a firm grin on her fan. Feeling that he was out of danger for the moment, Kankuro went back to complaining. And what about Gaara? How can you expect to put that guy on our team and have Gaara be okay with it after what just happened? That would be the sticking point, Baki admitted to himself. I'm afraid the best we can do for that is keep Gaara calm and convince him not to try killing the boy again. Yeah, that'll work, Kankuro replied, rolling his eyes. We'd have a better chance at convincing the sun to start rising in the north. If Gaara wants to kill him, you really think we're gonna be able to keep him from doing it? Keep me from killing who? Everyone tensed, and turned to the hallway where Gaara was now standing. Temari suddenly found something very interesting to look at on the floor and Kankuro began focusing intently on rubbing out a non-existent stain from his shirt. Baki, realizing he was once again stuck with dealing with the boy, sighed and moved to the middle of the room. Gaara, the boy from earlier, Uzumaki Naruto, is going to be training in our group from now on. Gaara's blank stare gave nothing away of what he was thinking. Is Kankuro leaving? Now that is not funny! Kankuro yelled, ignoring the stifled laughter from Temari. And what makes it worse is that I'm 100% certain that he's not trying to make a joke. Nobody is leaving, Gaara, Baki answered. He will be joining the three of you as a 4-person team at least until we can determine how well his abilities will be able to aid us. Can I trust you to refrain from any further attempts at killing him while he remains with us? No, you cannot, Gaara answered bluntly. I'll kill him if the urge arises. If you impede me again, then I'll kill you as well. Baki, Temari and Kankuro all flinched at the boy's dangerous tone. They'd been hearing it for close to 6 years now, but it never stopped from terrifying them. And just as the tension in the room reached its highest, the front door opened. Hey, Baka-sensei! Naruto shouted as he dashed into the room. Did I make it back in time? It hasn't been a full hour yet, has it? With a collective gulp, the others turned from Naruto to Gaara, waiting to see what might happen. Naruto, noticing that the others had turned from him, also noticed Gaara at the other end of the room and recoiled. You again? Look, I don't know what your problem was with me before, but I don't want to fight you again if I don't have to, okay? We're supposed to be on the same team now, but that won't stop me from finishing the ass-kicking I was about to give MMPH. The blonde found his speech cut off as both Temari and Kankuro had slapped their hands tightly over his mouth. Are you insane? Kankuro whispered frantically to him, glancing back and hoping to God that Gaara wasn't about to snap. Gaara just stared, however. His normally stoic glare was marred by a slight look of confusion. You have seen my abilities, and you know that they are far greater than your own. Why don't you fear me? Naruto struggled away from the clutches of Gaara's siblings. Why should I? He demanded. Just because you can control sand doesn't mean you're better than me. I'll figure out how to get past it, and then I'll beat you and anyone else who thinks they can stop me from achieving my goals. And you'd better believe it, or my name isn't Uzumaki Naruto. Silence fell over the room as 3 of the 5 occupants waited with bated breath. Gaara's eyes never broke away from Naruto's. You interest me, Uzumaki Naruto, he said. I wonder, though, how long will it take for your foolish bravery to crumble away to terror? Slowly, he turned and began ascending the stairway back up to the roof. Soon, Uzumaki Naruto, I will paint the desert sands red with your blood. Naruto growled as Gaara disappeared from sight. Geez, what the heck's with that guy? He never saw the blow coming, only felt a brief pain in the back of his head before falling to the ground unconscious. A seething Kankuro tossed the giant fan back to Temari, who looked very cross at having it ripped out of her hands. The puppet master turned a vicious glare at Baki. This is the guy you want on our team? He's going to get us all killed. Calm down, Kankuro. Calm down. How the hell do you expect me to calm down in a situation like this? Even you were 2 seconds away from jumping out the window and running for your life. Baki shook his head. Listen to me, Kankuro. Naruto is not from Suna, and he knows nothing about the Shikaku. With time Naruto will grow accustomed to how things are here. Until then we simply have to keep him from further provoking Gaara. Temari fell onto the couch and put her head in her hands. Baki-sensei, I'm all for giving this kid the benefit of the doubt, but why are you and Dad so gung-ho about it? It doesn't make any sense that he would be given such acceptance so quickly by either of you. Baki frowned. I'm afraid that is something that I cannot share with you yet, Temari. However, there is something special in Naruto, and we believe that with the proper training, he could become even greater than Gaara. The children stared at him like his skin had turned purple. Kankuro let out a tired sigh. Look, Sensei, it's late, and I'm way too exhausted for jokes right now. So you go ahead and do what you want with the idiot. I'm going to bed. And just remember, if Gaara goes ballistic and kills us all because of him, I'm hereby reserving the right to spend eternity in our afterlife saying I told you so. After Kankuro walked off to his own room, Baki turned to Temari, who was in turn staring at the unconscious boy before her. Stronger than Gaara? She asked, sounding very unconvinced. Baki nodded. That's why I need your help in keeping Gaara calm around him. If we can just build up his abilities, he could soon become one of Suna's greatest assets. Another silence passed over the room as Temari tried to take in everything that had happened in the last 24 hours. Ever since they had found the boy half dead in the desert, nothing was making sense anymore. I'll take the boy with me until we can find a suitable place for him, the Jounin said as he lifted the boy and tucked him under his arm. All things considered, I don't think it would be wise to leave him here. He turned to leave. Don't forget, meet at the usual training grounds at 8 tomorrow morning. Temari nodded. Now all alone, she lay back on the couch and gazed at the ceiling, wondering what other surprises her new teammate might bring in the days to come. Assuming he lived that long, of course. Uzumaki Naruto, she whispered. She still had no idea what Baki and her dad had seen in him that she must have missed, but she vowed then and there that she would do whatever it took to figure out what it was. Naruto awoke with a splitting headache. For several minutes he laid where he was, waiting for the throbbing in his head to subside. When it eventually did, he opened his eyes to find himself in an unfamiliar room. There was no light coming through the open window, but he could still make out the interior of the room. There really wasn't much to look at. He found himself lying on a small bed with plain white sheets. There was a small dresser in one corner next to a door that led somewhere, and a small desk with a lamp sitting next to the bed. Reaching over, he pulled the lamp string, bathing the room in a dim light. Taking another look around the room to see if he'd overlooked anything, he spotted a folded slip of paper resting against the base of the lamp. Picking it up, he unfolded it and scanned the words written inside. Naruto, this will be your room until further arrangements can be made. If you find this before morning, I advise you to rest well as our first training session will be at 8 o'clock at the Northern Training Grounds. I look forward to seeing more of your skills. On a far more serious note, I am instructing you to avoid Gaara as much as humanly possible. When we are not training as a group you are to refrain from approaching him, speaking with him, and above all, provoking him. I realize that you have your pride as a young shinobi, but you must understand when I tell you that you cannot hope to defeat Gaara in battle. Not even I am able to accomplish such a thing, and angering Gaara further will only result in more bloodshed within our village. So for the sake of the village and everyone in it, keep a low profile where Gaara is concerned. Baki. Naruto placed the letter back on the desk, lost deep in thought. After such a weird day there were so many questions he still wanted to ask about. He thought about his new team members. Temari was nice. Probably the nicest of the group, even if she did seem a bit short-tempered. At least she had taken the time to get to know him a little, and she had even sympathized with him when she learned about his leaving of Konoha. Kankuro was a jerk, and he didn't have much doubt that it had been him who'd knocked him out earlier. But like it or not, they were teammates now, and Naruto wasn't going to blow his chances of proving himself to the Kazekage and the rest of Suna just because he didn't get along with him. That brought him to Gaara. This guy was a freak, plain and simple. Naruto had never known anyone, especially not someone the same age as he, who could so easily talk about killing people and be so descriptive about it. It just wasn't natural. He thought back to what Temari had told him at the hospital. She had said something about noticing the signs of someone who had gone through life unloved like he had. She said she hadn't been talking about herself. Was it possible she meant Gaara? That made him think of their fight that day, and how the villagers had called Gaara a monster and a demon. He yawned deeply. He still had plenty of thinking to do, but it would have to wait until tomorrow after some much-needed sleep. A sewer again. On one side, the long narrow corridors that twisted and turned in a seemingly never-ending fashion. On the other side, the giant prison cell that any normal person could have easily slipped through and escaped, which of course was not the case for the creature that it contained. A pair of blazing red eyes appeared from behind the bars of the cell, gazing down at the boy with an unearthly hatred. Back again? The demon growled. I thought you didn't want anything to do with me anymore. It's not like I'm here on purpose. Naruto shouted at him. I just fell asleep and now I'm here. Well, go away. I don't like looking at you. Naruto crossed his arms and stuck his tongue out at the demon. Make me? We're still in my body, so I'll go wherever I want. That phony arrogance of yours is sickening, said the beast. He swiped one of his many tails against the cell door, causing a loud clang and a small rumbling, but still the seal held. You can't even handle that weakling Shikaku, and yet you put on an act before me because this seal keeps us apart. Naruto paused. Wait, Shikaku? Kyuubi let out a graveled chuckle. It seems I've said too much. Forget I said anything. Oh no, you don't. You can't just say something like that, and then not tell me what you mean. Who is Shikaku? Does he have something to do with Gaara or something? The fox demon remained silent. Just as Naruto was about to start yelling again, it decided to speak. Beg me. Naruto blinked in confusion. What? Beg me and I'll tell you. What? Why the hell should I have to beg you for anything? He demanded. Because I gave you the power to defeat your enemy and escape from Konohagakure. If it hadn't been for me, you would have been caught and brought back to a severe punishment. But I've yet to receive any sort of thanks from you for doing it. So I'm not giving up any more freebies, mortal. If you want anything further from me, you'd better be prepared to fall to your knees and praise the mighty power of the Kyuubi no Kitsune. Not a damn chance in hell. I don't need your help for anything, and I've never asked for it either. A loud grunt echoed through the sewer as the Kyuubi turned his gaze away from the cell door. You just remember that the next time you find yourself in over your head, which, considering it's you, shouldn't be too long from now. Naruto tried to respond, but found his surroundings beginning to blur out. A moment later, he found himself once again looking up at the ceiling of his new room. Sitting up, he squinted as sunlight was now pouring through the window. He ran his sleeve over his face, feeling it covered with sweat. It might have been the dream experience he just had, or it could have been that it already felt like it was 90 degrees outside. Moving to the edge of the bed and letting his legs hang over the edge, he tried to piece back together the conversation he just had with the Kyuubi. What was it he had talked about? Shuka something or other? Maybe he should ask Baki or Temari if they knew what it was. His eyes suddenly widened. What time was it? Jumping up and making sure he still had all of his clothes and equipment, he dashed out of the room. He found himself in a room not much smaller than the living room that he and the others had all been in the night before. Glancing around, he spotted a small clock sitting on a kitchen table, reading 7:50 a.m. Sitting next to it was a bowl of fresh fruits and a glass of milk. Resting against the glass was another piece of paper, which he quickly picked up and scanned. I hope you memorized Suna well. Don't be late, or I'll put Kankuro in charge of your training schedule. Baki, damn. In a flash the milk was drained and a large handful of purple-colored berries were jammed into his mouth. A second later he was out the door, and blazing off in what he hoped was the right way. He hated to think of the things that jerk Kankuro would put him through if he was given the chance. First, I'm gonna string him up to the highest branch on the tallest tree, and then cut him loose over and over until he's mastered control of his chakra climbing abilities. And then I'm gonna make him run laps around the village in the nude until he can make it all the way in less than 2 minutes. What does him being nude accomplish except for embarrassing him? Temari questioned. Absolutely nothing, Kankuro answered with an inexplicably evil grin. After that I'll work on his speed by having him dodge Karasa's poison needles with his arms and legs tied together. You're enjoying this far too much, Kankuro, she informed him. Gaara stood off to the side, occupying himself with forming spheres of sand in his hand and then crushing them over and over. Baki was staring at his timer, which was now showing less than a minute until 8. He was certain that he had properly motivated the boy, given the rivalry that he could already begin to see growing between him and Kankuro. Maybe he'd forgotten something. 10 seconds remained when an orange blur came into view on the horizon. He watched as it came closer, until the figure of Naruto could plainly be made out, running for all he was worth. He was only 30 meters away when he suddenly fell forward, face first into the sand. That's cheating, Kankuro, Temari accused him. Kankuro shrugged innocently. I don't know what you mean, sis. With his hand behind his back, he cut the chakra string that he'd left hidden under the sand just on the chance that this would happen. Undaunted, Naruto sprang up, ran forward and nearly collapsed before the others. Uzumaki Naruto reporting for duty, Baka-sensei. The boy was then struck in the forehead by the timer that Baki had thrown at him. I overlooked that little slip-up once, Uzumaki. If it happens again I'm going to believe that you're doing it on purpose. Naruto rubbed the small bump on his head. So did I make it? Barely, Baki admitted. Damn it! Kankuro grumbled. Now, before we go too far into actual training, I want to see a little more of your hands-on abilities, Naruto. We'll begin today with a short spar with, let me fight him. Naruto and Kankuro said as one, glaring holes into each other. Yes, I was going to say with Kankuro, Baki said, sounding annoyed. Not even waiting for the others to clear the general area, Kankuro unraveled Karasu and Naruto created a half-dozen Kage Bunshins. Allow me to give you my official welcome to Suna. Allow me to introduce you to my fist. The battle began. Oof. Naruto grunted, finding himself face down in the sand for the third time in as many minutes. A few yards away from him, a laughing Kankuro stood next to a ghastly, gangly-looking puppet. Just like I said, Kage Bunshins just can't measure up to Karasu. Naruto pushed himself back up, growling irritably. Damn it, No way in hell am I gonna lose to someone who wears makeup and plays with dolls. Off to the side, Gaara, Temari and Baki stood watching, the first looking as stoic as ever, the second looking slightly confused and a little let down, and the third looking thoughtful. He's not very good, is he, sensei? The kunoichi stated more than asked. Baki grunted in agreement, rubbing his chin absently. Temari was correct, in a rather blunt way. While the boy certainly had an overabundance of stamina, he just wasn't using his techniques to his fullest advantage. Despite what Kankuro had said, by all accounts Naruto, with his Kage Bunshin, should have had the advantage in this match. Fighting out in a barren sandy area with very few trees or large stones like they were, there were very few places for Kankuro to hide, leaving him out in the open as he manipulated his puppet. In this sense, if Naruto had used his clones properly, he could easily have kept Karasu at bay while he or another clone attacked Kankuro from a blind side. Unfortunately, Naruto was doing little more than commanding his clones to charge en masse as opposed to forming any such strategies, and Kankuro's mastery over manipulating his favorite puppet was keeping the boy from getting close enough to attack. The boy would definitely need work. Apparently being the container of Kyuubi didn't automatically make you a genius shinobi. Ready to give up, midget? Kankuro continued to taunt. I've barely had to move a muscle yet, and you've lost all of your clones already. Naruto rubbed his sand-smudged face. Then I'll just make more. So saying, he performed his jutsu again, and 10 more Narutos appeared around him. Kankuro just rolled his eyes. A one-trick pony, huh? Whatever, you keep setting them up and I'll keep knocking them down. I've got plenty of tricks up my sleeve, he assured him. Take this. Henge. Kankuro blinked in surprise as the Narutos vanished within a puff of smoke. Henge? Henge? Baki and Temari mimicked his surprise. Kankuro started laughing. What the hell good is transforming going to? Oh my. Oh, Kankuro-kun. The group of well-figured and, if you didn't count the lingering smoke, naked women squealed as they dove at the boy. Before Kankuro could even think to defend himself, the girls had latched themselves onto his arms, legs, waist, and neck. Come play with us, Kankuro-kun. They cooed suggestively. Kankuro didn't have a chance, as a geyser of blood shot from his nose and he collapsed in a blood-soaked heap. The 10 clones disappeared and the remaining girl transformed back to Naruto, who was looking mighty proud of himself. Harem no jutsu, he explained to the unconscious Kankuro. Learn to fear the name. For with this technique I, Uzumaki Naruto, am invincible. Baka! Temari shouted, bashing the unsuspecting boy's head into the sand with her fan. Naruto gave a few weak twitches before pulled his head out. What was that for? He asked, spitting sand out of his mouth. Are you trying to kill us? The kunoichi demanded. She pointed behind her. Look at what that stupid technique of yours did. Naruto glanced behind her, spotting Gaara, looking slightly curious with a light grin on his face. Next to him was an unconscious Baki, who was also bleeding profusely from the nose. Wow, I never would have thought that Baka-sensei would have been the type. That's not what Temari growled and hauled Naruto back to his feet by his jacket. Come here. She dragged him several meters away, until she was sure that they were out of hearing range of the others. What's wrong? Naruto asked. Listen, Baka, when Gaara sees blood he gets excited. And when he gets excited, he gets violent. Have you already forgotten what happened the last time Gaara got violent? Naruto paled slightly, remembering Baki's warning to him. Right, so no sexy no jutsu around Gaara. Got it. How about no sexy no jutsu period, you pervert? I'm embarrassed just knowing that someone on the same team as me knows such a move. Hey! He whined. I'm not a pervert. I just created it to defeat perverts, there's a difference. Besides, it's one of my best techniques. I've beaten every guy I've ever used it on. Temari looked disgusted. Then it's about time you learned some new ones. Naruto's eyes lit up. Are you saying you'll teach me some of your jutsus? She snorted. You wish. Why not? He pouted. Mainly because all of my jutsus are wind-based. You'd have to have chakra with a high wind affinity to even hope of learning any of my techniques. Well, maybe I do have a wind affinity. He protested. How do I find out whether I do or not? Sighing at the boy's stubbornness, she opened a small pack that she had brought with her that morning. Rummaging through it, she eventually pulled out a small square of paper. Here, take this, hold it in your hand and focus your chakra into it. Naruto grabbed the paper, staring at it like it was supposed to perform a trick. What's a piece of paper supposed to do? It's a special paper that determines people's chakra types. If you have a certain affinity with an element, it will have a significant effect on the paper. Just give it a try. Naruto still looked skeptical as he glanced back and forth between the paper and the girl. Well, if you say so. I'm going to tell you right now though, some people don't have elemental affinities, and the chances of you having a wind affinity like me are. She stopped talking upon seeing the slip of paper cleave itself perfectly into 2 halves in the boy's hand. Better than I would have guessed, she mumbled dumbly. Naruto stared at the 2 halves of paper in astonishment. Hey, it split apart. What does that mean? I guess it means we can start your jutsu training sooner than I thought, she said lightly, trying to hide her irritation at being proven wrong so quickly. Yada! The blonde shouted, throwing his fist in the air. New jutsu! How many are you going to teach me? Let's not get ahead of ourselves, okay? Just because you can manipulate wind doesn't mean you'll be able to learn anything from me. I don't waste my time with low-level jutsu, you know? No sweat, he said excitedly. I'll master everything you have to teach me, Temari Nichin. I'll become the best wind jutsu user in Suna. You think so, huh? The kunoichi asked, feeling slightly miffed. Since you don't seem to already know, I already am the best wind jutsu specialist in all of Suna. Seriously? Yep, I was taught by the best, after all. The best? His eyes widened. You mean the Kazekage taught you? Of course, he is our dad, you know? Naruto was astounded. Why didn't you tell me that before? If he's your dad, then you could put in a good word for me when my time comes to become the new Kazekage. Temari batted him on the side of his head. You really do have a one-track mind, don't you? Only if it's something I really, really want, he answered proudly. That reminds me, is it really true that there's absolutely no ramen in Suna whatsoever? Temari just shook her head, more in exasperation than to confirm his question. Without even realizing it, she'd ended up lost in a conversation with Naruto when she should have been concentrating on training. Maybe having someone around that she could actually talk to wouldn't be so bad. Turning back to the others, they found that Gaara had already vanished and the two men were still out cold. Well, it doesn't look like we're going to get any more training this morning. Naruto had the good sense to look embarrassed. Naruto walked back through the village. Having helped bring Kankuro and Baki back to the house to recover from massive blood loss, he was now searching for lunch. He hummed happily to himself as he went. Today was going great. He'd had his first team practice, would be getting special jutsu training from Temari, and beat that idiot Kankuro. It was all but perf. He stopped his trail of thought right there as something clicked in his head. Ever since he'd come to Suna, his life had seemingly turned into a seesaw of good and bad fortune. Whenever something good happened for him, something bad kept happening soon after. First he'd made friends with Temari, Baki and Kankuro sort of, but then he'd almost been killed by Gaara. Then he'd been made a ninja, only to find out that he was living in a village completely devoid of ramen. Following that logic, and seeing how well his day was going so far, it seemed almost certain that his luck would be changing. Eep! Naruto yelped as he felt himself trip over what felt like a small sand dune. Reflexively closing his eyes, he expected to end up with his face in the sand. Hopefully no one would see him. So he was rather shocked when he felt no impact, but instead felt himself being lifted upside down by his foot. Opening his eyes, he found himself staring into a pair of light green eyes surrounded by thick, dark rings. Crap. What's up, Gaara? He asked, hoping the situation wasn't really as bad as it looked. That technique he used, Gaara said darkly. Teach me how it works. Naruto was dumbfounded. He attempted to speak once, but couldn't seem to form the proper words. He decided to try again. Why? Gaara's blank stare didn't waver. You caused Kankuro and Baki to bleed copious amounts without even touching them. All you had to do was change your appearance. I want to know how you did it. Naruto blanched. It appeared the situation had just become worse than he had thought. I really don't think that Temari Nichin would approve of that. Then die, was Gaara's short response. Wait. Naruto cried as he felt the sand around his ankle start to spread up his leg. Let's not be too hasty about this. I mean, well, why would you want to learn sexy no jutsu anyway? The sand stopped spreading, but it didn't recede either. To make someone bleed as much as I like, I usually have to crush their bodies or rip them apart. Unfortunately, a person who is dead only bleeds once. It would be more enjoyable if I could make them bleed many times before I killed them. Naruto cringed at the gruesome images that filled his head from those descriptions. Unfortunately, at the same time it seemed funny that Gaara would want to learn sexy no jutsu for such a reason. Naruto had to make the assumption that Gaara really knew nothing at all about women, or the female body. Still, he wasn't about to start laughing about it. You will teach me, said Gaara, sounding more like a command than a question. Naruto quickly looked over his options. Possible death at the hands of a pissed-off Temari, or certain death at the hands of Gaara. God, his karma sucked. Well, you know I can't guarantee that you'll be able to learn it, but if I show you how to do it, will you please lay off the whole killing me thing? Gaara looked to be contemplating the request. If you cannot guarantee that I will learn it, then I cannot guarantee that I won't kill you. Naruto drooped. It didn't look like he was going to get off any easier than that. Fair enough, I guess. The sand dispersed, dropping the blonde on his head. Don't think that I'll forget, the redhead called back as he trudged off, leaving Naruto by himself again. Naruto got back to his feet, brushing the sand from his hair. His life in Suna just kept getting stranger and stranger. Temari and Baki certainly wouldn't be happy if they happened to find out about this. On the bright side, however, according to his recent chain of fortune, he should be due for some good luck real soon. Maybe that good luck would come in the form of a traveling ramen vendor. And Chapter 6. Chapter 7. Form hand seals. Bird, rat, dragon, bird. Focus chakra. Now, place fist on ground, and release. Ha! He grinned triumphantly as he felt hot gusts of wind begin swirling around his body, kicking up sheets of sand in an imitation of Gaara's own. The winds continued to pick up speed. His grin grew wider and wider, until a blast of sand shot up into his face, knocking him to his back in a sputtering heap. He sat up, spitting sand from his mouth and brushing out his hair. He was really beginning to hate sand really quickly. Damn, I could have sworn I had it right that time. You're still not focusing properly. Naruto turned to his companion. What did I do wrong this time, Temari-nichan? Watch. So quick that the boy almost missed it. Temari had formed the 4 seals and slammed her fist into the sand. Instantly, a strong wind picked up, casting a swirling vortex of sand around the body of the kunoichi. The sand twister roared loudly for several seconds before dying back down. Naruto, who had been blown backward by the sudden winds, sat up and gaped at her. Wow, was all he could mutter. Futon, Tatsumaki Shihiki. A defensive sea-level jutsu used to deflect incoming projectiles as well as scatter enemies when surrounded. The blonde sat down in front of him, setting her fan on the ground beside her. Now, the reason why yours is still not working the way mine did is because you're still not grasping the concept of chakra manipulation to its fullest extent. Naruto stared blankly, but nodded. Okay, so what do I do? First of all, you're gathering too much chakra required for the technique that you're trying to perform, the kunoichi continued. But once you actually execute the jutsu, you don't release enough chakra for it to perform properly. That's why it keeps starting out so weak and slowly. But when you continue to pump chakra into your tornado to build it up, you put too much into it at one time, which is what causes you to keep eating mouthfuls of sand. The proper way to do it is to put in just the right amount, and then keep that amount pumping in constantly. The longer you add your chakra, the longer and more powerful the tornado will become. You've been learning chakra manipulation with Baki-sensei for about 3 days now, and I don't know how much training you've had before coming here. But to be completely blunt, your chakra control absolutely sucks. By focusing excessive amounts of chakra and then only using about a third of it, you're wasting a huge portion of your chakra supplies. Remember, you can't reuse the wasted chakra that you've focused, so once it's gone, it's gone. Then you have to rest until you get your stamina back naturally. Are you keeping up with me? Naruto blinked, hiding his confusion well. Temari rolled her eyes. Fortunately for you, you've got more stamina stored up in you than an alpha male wolf. Even with all the chakra that you waste, you're still able to create waves of shadow clones without fatiguing. So if you could get a firm handle on your control, you could become one of the better shinobi that Suna has to offer. Temari saw Naruto's eyes light up but cut him off. I said could become, meaning if you can actually do it. Right now you've already proven that you're not even a match against Kankuro when he's not even using any of Karasa's weapons. Naruto's brow furrowed in thought. Wouldn't it just be easier to use a big fan like you use? That seems a lot simpler than having to form a bunch of different seals and focusing chakra and all that other stuff. Not necessarily, it isn't, she explained. It's true that I don't have to form seals when I use my fan, but you still have to focus chakra. In fact, when using weapons to perform jutsu with, you have to be able to channel your chakra into the weapon itself, which is much more difficult than just manipulating it within your own body. If you mess that up, you have a good chance of destroying your weapon instead. Until you've mastered the basics, you won't have a prayer of a chance at mastering something like this. Naruto drooped. Besides, a fan like this isn't something you can just go out and buy. This thing was made by my grandmother, she told him, running her hand along the giant fan fondly. Naruto couldn't respond. Not having any grandmother or other family to speak of made it a bit hard to relate to. The moment passed, and soon the two were back to training. Naruto repeated the process of forming, focusing, and almost succeeding several more times, while Temari sat to the side, giving pointers every couple of attempts. Before the mid-afternoon heat became too much for both, and they decided to call it a day. How can you stand this? Naruto huffed as the two walked down the sandy streets toward Temari's home. He had rolled up his pants legs to above his knees and removed his orange jacket halfway through his training, which he was now using to wipe away the sweat that was pouring down his face. Geez, I'm sweating like a pig and you still look fresh as a daisy. What gives? Your thick clothes are absorbing and trapping all the heat that touches it, while mine is specially designed to disperse heat and keep the wearer cool in hot conditions. Desert wear, almost everyone in Suna wears it. That's it? He asked. Nope, move closer to me. Huh? The command surprised him, as he noticed the two were already walking fairly close to one another. Don't get any dumb thoughts, she warned. She held up her hand. Here, touch my hand. Naruto stared at the offered appendage. And she doesn't want me getting weird thoughts. Hesitantly, he reached out and put his hand on hers, making his eyes widen in surprise. What the heck? Temari grinned, taking her hand back. It's another wind jutsu that I created. It creates a tiny breeze that travels along my skin to keep me cool. It's tricky, but it sure as hell beats having to take half a dozen cold baths each day like some people here do. Naruto stared at the girl, admiration and awe visible on his face. A girl her age could already create her own unique jutsus. Well, he'd created a few of his own too, but hers were certainly a lot more sensible, he supposed. It was something ingenious to come up with for life in the desert, but now that he'd heard of it, he couldn't believe that no one had ever thought of something like it before. But then admiration turned into annoyance. Why didn't you teach me that jutsu first? He demanded. Your teammate is dehydrating right next to you and you're keeping jutsus like that a secret? Temari crossed her arms and frowned at him. Well, aren't you the ungrateful one? Here I am taking time out of my own life to give you personal lessons, something I haven't even done before for my own brothers, and yet all you can do is complain about it. Why do I even bother? Naruto, rather predictably, panicked. No, it's not that I'm ungrateful or anything, 'cause I am, really. I mean, you doing this is one of the few nice things that anyone's ever done for me. It's just that, well, I thought. Temari hid a smirk, letting the boy ramble on for a few more seconds before cutting in. Really? Because I was planning on teaching you this jutsu once you got a little more familiar with wind jutsus first. But now I don't really think you deserve it. No, wait, I deserve it. I mean, I promise not to complain anymore. Just teach it to me, please. Well, maybe I could still teach you, but I am still taking time out of my personal life to do this, you know? So what exactly are you going to do to pay me back for it, Naruto brightened slightly. Oh, well, I could err. Then he found his problem. What exactly could he do to repay her? He didn't have many hobbies or things that he excelled at that didn't involve ninja business in some way. Most of his life before Suna mainly involved pranks, ramen, training, and not a whole lot else, honestly. Temari couldn't keep the grin away anymore as she watched the poor boy practically pull his hair out in distress. She wondered how much longer she could string him along before he got wise to her game. Probably at least for the rest of the day, would have been her guess. Too bad she had other things that needed to be done that day, too. Naruto, she said, swatting the boy lightly on the head to bring him back to reality. What do you say we work out your payments later? I'm getting hungry here. Naruto blinked at her, letting his incoherent thoughts slip away at her decision. Okay, sure. For about a minute more, the two walked in silence, both lost in their own thoughts. But as they approached the house, Naruto remembered something that he'd been meaning to do for the past few days. Say, Temari-nichan? What is it? She asked absently. Do you know what a shikaku is? Naruto watched worriedly as all the color instantly drained from the kunoichi's face. Where did you hear about that? She asked quietly. Now it was his turn to pale. He hadn't thought that she would ask him that, and what was he supposed to tell her? That a demon fox who lived inside his body mentioned it in passing during a dream he'd had? Not bloody likely. He took a stab in the dark. I heard a few villagers mentioning it yesterday. Temari had no idea what to say. Of course he would hear things about Shikaku the longer he stayed in the village, but she didn't think it would have been this soon. Now what? Did she tell him or not? He was part of the team now, so he probably did deserve to know about Gaara's other self for safety and necessity reasons. But on the other hand, having him know could very easily complicate things between everyone. I think it would be best to ask Baki-sensei about that, she concluded. I'm sure he'd be able to tell you more than I could. Naruto scratched his head. Yeah, I guess. That's what I planned on doing. Sorry, don't worry about it, she said dismissively. Just don't mention it to anyone else until you talk to him, alright? Naruto nodded mutely, and the two continued onward in a very awkward silence. At least he now knew that the Kyuubi hadn't just been screwing with him. Judging by the way Temari reacted, this Shikaku thing was definitely bad news, and he still had the sneaking feeling that it somehow involved Gaara. Now he really needed to begin figuring these things out. The rest of the day passed by without incident, though the hours seemed to speed by far too quickly for Naruto's liking. Baki had stayed out for the entire time that Naruto had been at the house, so he'd never gotten the opportunity to question him about Shikaku or Gaara. But that's where another problem sprang up. Tonight was the night where he was finally going to have to meet up with Gaara for his jutsu training. It had been 3 days since Gaara had brought it up, and even though he still wasn't feeling up to doing it, he had the sneaking suspicion that Gaara was growing impatient. Watching the redhead crush a sand replica of Naruto that morning during practice was a fairly good signal that his time was running out. Nightfall came, and with Baki still gone to who knew where, Naruto left the house and made his way to his teammate's home. A lot of bad thoughts began filling his head as he walked. From all the things he already knew about Gaara, the boy could very well kill him the minute he showed up for delaying the training for so many days. Or there was the chance that Gaara wouldn't be able to master the technique, and would kill him out of irritation. And then there was still the matter of one of the others finding out about what they were doing. Temari would rip him a new one, Baki would berate him and probably demote him for ignoring his orders, and Kankuro, being the royal jerk that he was, would join in just for the fun of it. Or maybe they would all find the act of Gaara learning sexy no jutsu to be funny as hell and laugh the whole thing off. Again, not bloody likely. Before he knew it, he was standing outside the mansion-sized house. Breathing a heavy sigh, he jumped up to the roof. He had barely touched down before his body was bound in a cocoon of sand and slammed against the wall of the stairway. Wait, Gaara, it's just me, he cried earnestly. I know, came a cold reply. The boy stood up from his position at the ledge of the roof, then turned and walked over to stand before the trapped blonde. You've been avoiding me. A drop of sweat formed on Naruto's brow. No way, pal. It's not that I've avoided you on purpose or anything, I've just, been busy and stuff. But hey, I'm here now, right? So how about that training? Gaara's glare seemed to lessen slightly, or it might have been a trick of the moonlight, he wasn't sure. But finally, the sands receded back into the gourd and Naruto fell to the ground. Gaara silently positioned himself on the ground in front of him. Teach, he commanded. Naruto gingerly rubbed his sore lower back, holding his tongue so as not to tell Gaara that the real thing he needed taught was people skills. Okay, well I guess the first thing you should know about sexy no jutsu is that it doesn't work on everybody. Gaara's hard stare was Naruto's only indication that he should continue. You see, it's meant to only work on guys. Although I suppose it could work on certain girls, maybe, and then there are some guys who are able to resist it, so why was I able to resist it when Baki and Kankuro were not? Gaara questioned. Do you like girls? I don't like anyone. Naruto flinched at the venomous statement. That's probably why then. And it won't work on me, either, since I created it. I know better than to let it get to me. He could have been wrong, but Gaara almost looked disappointed at hearing that. Tell me how it works, Gaara commanded. Right? You do know how to henge, right? The Sannin gave a small nod. Okay, well basically, all you have to do is transform yourself into the image of a sexy girl. The less amount of clothes she's wearing, the better the result, he explained. Sexy? Naruto faltered. He didn't even know what sexy meant? Well, you know, sexy is just it's the way a girl's body looks that makes you attracted to. He paused when he remembered that Gaara didn't seem to find girls attractive. Okay, forget that. Sexy is like women that are thin and curvy, with large or well they have to have Staring into the completely neutral face of Gaara while trying to describe this made Naruto feel more foolish and perverted than ever before in his life. Then an idea hit him. Wait here a minute, he said. I'll be right back. And with that, he jumped off the roof. Gaara waited unmoving for about 3 minutes when Naruto returned with something in his hand. Here, look at this, he told him, handing over the rolled-up magazine. Gaara accepted the item in curiosity. Slowly, he began flipping through the pages, growing in understanding as he did. So this is the image that I need to imitate, he muttered more to himself than to Naruto. Yep, just get your henge to look as close to them as you can, and you should have no problems with it. Gaara turned the magazine sideways. Do women often do such things to each other while bathing? Skip that part, skip that part. Naruto prompted urgently. Gaara dropped the magazine. I will try now. Naruto gulped. Good luck? Gaara ignored him, and formed the proper hand seal. With a puff of smoke, he vanished from sight. Naruto watched on expectantly, waiting to see what would turn out. His life could very well hang in the balance of the outcome. In no time the smoke had mostly cleared, leaving Naruto standing face to face with temari, or at least a red-headed temari with little black rings around her eyes. But the rest of the face and, if he had to venture a guess, that body definitely belonged to his female teammate. Faced with this new revelation, the boy found no other alternative but to faint. When consciousness returned, the blonde found himself staring up at a back-to-normal Gaara. I thought you told me this technique didn't affect you, he said, though he didn't look all that upset about it. Naruto sat up and shook the cobwebs from his head, thanking his lucky stars that he hadn't bled nearly as much as he thought he would have. That's only because I wasn't expecting you to turn into your sister, he said in annoyance. You told me to transform into a woman, Gaara stated evenly. Temari is a woman. That's not, he stammered. He didn't think he'd ever be able to look as Temari again without blushing at this point. You're not supposed to turn into someone you actually know, that just makes it weird. And could also get me killed in a heartbeat, he said, whispering the last part. Then what is the right way to do it? He asked, starting to sound annoyed. Just do like I do, he told him, hoping to calm him before he lost his temper. I just tried to imagine what I might look like as a girl and transformed into that. Gaara remained silent for a while before reaching down and picking up the discarded magazine. Where did you get this? A guilty look crossed the blonde's face. Damn it, where is it? Kankuro cried. The puppet ninja was standing in the middle of his room, which looked like a hurricane had passed through it. He frantically pulled the mattress off his bed, then ran to the back of his closet, throwing things out without a care. I know it was here last night. Damn, where did I put it? Lose something? A voice from the doorway inquired. No. Go away. Temari frowned, then turned and walked away. Whatever. Kankuro continued searching when a dreadful thought hit him. Temari. What if she had already found it, and was toying with him? Oh God, she'd never let him live that down. It had to be here. I just found it lying around somewhere, Naruto answered, trying to look innocent. Gaara glanced at him, then back to the magazine. I will keep it for further study until I perfect this technique then, Naruto snorted. Coming from anyone other than Gaara, that comment would have sounded incredibly perverted. Well, good luck with that then. You will meet me here again tomorrow. Huh? But I've already shown you. Until I have perfected the technique, you will continue to assist me, or I will kill you. Naruto shivered. Well, when you put it that way, and without another word, Gaara turned away and positioned himself back on the ledge of the roof, gazing up at the moon. Naruto stared at him for a few more seconds, then he jumped from the roof and began making his way back to Baki's. Back on the roof, Gaara suddenly clutched his head, letting a deep snarl escape his throat. Yes, I agree, he mumbled, squinting his eyes open, and gazing down at the vanishing Naruto's form. There is something different about him. What do we do about it? A moment of silence passed as the boy seemed to be waiting for something. Then he grinned. Yes, perhaps you're right. Naruto-kun. Naruto couldn't quite tell where he was, as the surroundings seemed a bit blurred. What he could tell was that Temari was standing before him, smiling at him in a very suggestive manner. He opened his mouth to answer but couldn't form any proper words. Naruto-kun. The next thing he knew, the blonde girl before him was stark naked, as the light purple outfit she normally wore simply dissolved off of her body. In his shock, he tried to turn his head away before he suffered another nosebleed, but found that no matter where he looked, she was still right in front of him. Naruto. Now there were hundreds of them. One right after the other, still looking at him expectantly, and he couldn't even find the proper strength to squeeze his eyes shut to block out the images. Naruto. Now they all had red hair, and the lingering smoke around their bodies had changed to sand. Uzumaki. One by one, each red-headed temari poofed into a Gaara, the seductive smile being replaced by a sinister glower. The sand swirling around them grew fangs and started twisting about like giant snakes. Then he saw that all the Gaaras were still naked. Uzumaki! And then, suddenly, he was sitting upright in his bed. His heart raced, his body soaked with sweat, and his mind was clouded with images that had haunted his mind just seconds before. Kami, he mumbled, dragging a hand through his matted hair. I think I've created a monster. I'd take my dreamtime conversations with Kyubi any day if it meant no more dreams like that one. Then his door blew off its hinges, and standing in the doorway was a ticked-off Baki. Naruto made the assumption that he'd been waiting there for a while. You sleep like a log, Uzumaki, but nap time is over now, he growled. The Kazekage has summoned us. We have a mission. Mission? Really? Suddenly the dream was a forgotten memory. Yes, now get up and let's go. Temari is already waiting for us there, he said impatiently. What about Gaara and Kankuro? They won't be coming. Now stop asking questions. Yes, sir. Naruto jumped out of bed and began dressing. Then he stopped as something dawned on him. He gave Baki a strange look. Hey sensei? What, Naruto? Did you call me Naruto-kun a minute ago? The two stared at each other in a painful silence. I'm going to forget you ever asked me that question, Uzumaki. And I'll thank you now to never suggest it again. Right. How he hated the desert. The blistering temperature was absolute torture on his skin. Even with his entire body covered with the long gray cloak and sun hat, he was still very uncomfortable. He wouldn't even be here now if it weren't so important to his cause, though he would be making it a priority to never come back again. Well, not unless he felt the urge to destroy the place, at any rate. He came into view of the large village and approached the front gates, where he was quickly stopped by two Jounin guards. State your name and business here, one of them demanded. Rather than answer, he simply lifted his hat, giving the men a good look at his face. The guard who had spoken gulped in surprise. Oh, it's you, sir. Please forgive my rudeness. Kazekage-sama is awaiting you. Please, go ahead. The man smirked, lowered his hat, and continued on into the village. Would you stop fidgeting around, Naruto? Temari whispered to the boy. I can't help it, he whispered back giddily. This will be my first real mission as a ninja and I'm excited. The Kazekage cleared his throat loudly, causing them both to snap to attention. Are you through? He asked darkly. They both nodded stiffly. Good. Now then, we received a letter from the Land of Rain this morning. It appears that they have been having several conflicts with the Grass Country in the past few months, and currently sit on the verge of an all-out war. Specifics have not been given to us yet, but both sides are apparently looking to solve their feud without the need for further violence. However, every time a meeting is held to discuss peace, more problems arise between them, so the leader of Amigakure has asked that we send a few reinforcements to aid them in the event that a battle does break out. Naruto's excitement continued to grow. This sounded like it was turning into a really important mission for them. He glanced at Temari to see how she was reacting, but her gaze was still fixed straight ahead at her father. Catching the hint, Naruto turned back as well. Baki, you and your team will go to Amigakure as backup. Follow whatever orders their leader might give, but remember, you are not to instigate an attack against anyone from Kazekage unless it has become clear that fighting is unavoidable. This is essentially meant to be a peace mission. Is that clear? All three nodded. Good, in that case, Uzumaki and Temari, you are both dismissed. Baki, I need to speak with you for a minute. Baki bowed his head to the Kazekage, then turned to the kids. You two go inform Gaara and Kankuro of our mission. I will meet up with you all at the village gates in 1 hour. Right. Naruto shouted, pumping his fist in the air. Yes, sensei, Temari replied with a small salute to both Baki and her father. As the two genin left the room, Baki returned his attention to the Kazekage. Sir, I'm expecting an important guest in just a moment, but before he gets here, there's something else that we need to discuss. This is gonna be so cool. Please tell me you won't be this hyper all the way to AIM. Aren't you excited about it too, Temari-nichan? Naruto questioned. Not really, she admitted. I've done this sort of thing before, and it wasn't that big. Well, I haven't, he interrupted gleefully. My first real mission, and it involves stopping a war, and all this time I was afraid that my first mission was gonna be something lame like catching somebody's runaway cat or weeding someone's garden or something like that. Temari grimaced, remembering her own first mission, which sadly enough, involved gathering scented herbs for an elderly woman who liked using them in baths. That was a dark time of her career, for certain. So what's Amigakure like, Temari-nichan? Naruto asked, bringing her back from her memories. I've only been there once before, but from what I've seen the place is made up mostly of rainforest, or jungle-like areas. As you might guess, it gets more annual rainfall than anywhere else in the world, and even when it's not raining it's still ridiculously cool and humid. In short, almost an exact opposite of Suna. Naruto was about to comment on that as they rounded a corner, but was stopped when he nearly bumped into someone. He managed to stop himself just in time, but as he looked up to apologize to the person, their eyes met, and his words caught in his throat. He studied the man before him, who was already studying him in return. His face was a ghostly pale, as though his skin hadn't been touched by sunlight in years. Underneath his wide-brimmed hat, he caught a glimpse of long black hair. His thin mouth was twisted into a curious smirk as he looked Naruto up and down. His eyes were narrow slits of bright yellow, with a hint of danger hidden within them. The man resembled a large snake, Naruto decided. And just from looking at him, he also decided that he wasn't someone that he would want to associate himself with. The man's eyes swept over Naruto once more in fascination. Then with a small tip of his hat, he simply walked right past him. "Please excuse me," he muttered lightly, "but I'm in a bit of a hurry." As he walked out of sight, Naruto shivered and turned to Temari. "What kind of creepy guy was that?" "That's not somebody that you want to get yourself involved with, Naruto," she assured him. "He's been sending a lot of letters and envoys to father for months now, but I've never found out what they were about. All I can guess is that he's hoping for some sort of alliance with him." "So who is he?" Naruto asked. "The only things I know for sure are that he's the leader of Otogakure, from the land of rice fields. His name is, Orochimaru," the Kazekage greeted. "A pleasure to finally meet you again after such a long time." "Believe me, Kazekage-sama, the pleasure is all mine," Orochimaru replied, finally removing his hat. The Kazekage took a moment to wave Baki away, who bowed and left the room without another word. "I trust that your trip here went well." "As well as can be expected," the pale man answered. "Though I do admit that this sandy wasteland atmosphere isn't exactly pleasant for me. Perhaps next time we can arrange for you to meet with me in Oto. I think you would enjoy it." "Perhaps," he answered curtly. "But I know you didn't travel all this way out here just to discuss the weather." Orochimaru grinned. "Before we get down to business, a question, if I may?" Kazekage eyed him cautiously. "Go ahead." "I happened upon a young boy on my way here, a blonde boy in an orange suit with whisker marks on his face. Might I trouble you for his name?" The yondaime kept his face emotionless, not knowing if the snake Sannin was up to something or not. "Uzumaki Naruto, a newly ranked genin of mediocre talent." "Why do you ask?" Orochimaru's grin widened as he shook his head. "No reason, sir. Just being my nosy self." "Now then, what say we get down to the real matter at hand?" Meanwhile, in Konoha, "And that is the situation," Sarutobi said, addressing the 4 people standing before his desk. "The Land of Grass has sent a request for extra manpower from us in the event of an upcoming battle with Amigakure. You 4 will travel to Kazekage and lend support to their cause, but they have made it clear that they would like this conflict solved without having to resort to violence if at all possible." "Is that clear?" The jounin of the group stepped forward and struck what he believed to be a manly pose. "Yash! This mission is in good hands, Hokage-sama, my young, lovable students, and I shall show the shinobi and Kusa and aim the burning fires of our youth. They will see the errors of their ways and be sent down the path to peace and prosperity." One of the boys standing behind him, looking like an exact copy of the taller man, flexed his arm. "Guy-sensei is so cool," he declared. "Watching him in action fills my spirit with the flames of springtime, and my body with the passions of youth." "Lee!" Guy cried. "Guy-sensei!" The 2 men fell into a tight embrace. One could almost hear the crashing waves beneath the setting sun in the background. The girl and second boy who were watching them turned their heads away in embarrassment. "Yosha!" Guy bellowed loudly after releasing Lee. "Let us be off, my students. If we leave now, we can make Kusa in exactly 3 days. "No, Guy-sensei," Lee objected. "I believe we can get there in only 2 days. Don't say stupid things like that," the girl shouted after the 2 as they ran from the room. "You'll only encourage him." The remaining boy watched his team exit the room, then sighed and calmly followed suit. Sarutobi smiled lightly as the team left. It wasn't often that they received a request for help from Kusa, but he was certain that Guy and his students could handle the situation. After all, in a peace treaty like this with Kusa and AIM, what could really go wrong for them? End Chapter 7. What if Rinnegan Naruto joins Suna Naruto x Temari? And thanks for watching my video till the end. If you enjoyed this content, then do consider subscribing to my channel, and leave a like if you guys need the next part. Comment down, and thanks for watching the video, and see you guys in the next video.